Demon Slayer. I started with the stone mask. Chapter 1. C. Jenkins' final consciousness was abruptly cut off. A second ago, the computer screen was still dimly lit, reflecting his bloodshot eyes. Komatado Tanjiro's scorching scarlet blade, carrying an unstoppable aura, was slashing towards the hideous demon, the glint of the blade tracing a dazzling trajectory in the dark room. The light was fierce, resolute, carrying the will to cut down all evil, almost breaking through the confines of the screen. C. Jenkins' heart pounded like a drum in his chest, the fatigue and dizziness from staying up late temporarily suppressed by a surge of excitement. But just as C. Jenkins was excited, the next second, his heart suddenly clenched, and all sounds, the low hum of the computer fan, the distant traffic outside the window, the intense battle sound effects from the video, instantly receded from him, and his vision plunged into a dead silence of darkness. He didn't even have time to feel pain, only a lingering sense of weightlessness, as if being instantly thrown from a great height by an immense force, like a straight fall from a 1,000-foot cliff. Then, there was a violent impact at the end of the fall. Excruciating pain erupted from deep within his body, every bone groaned. C. Jenkins bounced violently on the cold, uneven ground, a broken sob escaping his throat. He gasped for air, and the cold air, carrying an indescribably thick, fishy smell, rushed into his lungs, making him cough violently, tears instantly welling up. His consciousness was like shattered glass, the shards piercing his brain with pain. Where was he? Where was the screen? Where was Tanjiro's blade light? This bone-chilling cold, this nauseating, intense smell of rust mixed with rotting flesh, what was happening? He struggled to open his heavy eyelids, his vision blurry, as if through a layer of sticky blood. He blinked laboriously, trying to focus. Above him was a blue night sky, a crescent pale moon casting a cold halo, outlining the surroundings, a narrow, dirty alley. The source of that suffocating stench was just a few steps away from him. The moonlight, like a spotlight, illuminated a clearing. A human-like remains lay sprawled, shattered into pieces. Dark red liquid soaked the ground, forming a viscous swamp that silently spread towards where C. Jenkins lay, a foot from his fingertips. In the center, something was crouching, its back to him, hunched and shrugging, its skin pale and grayish-blue, its messy hair covering its face, its movements greedy and urgent. Crunch, creak. A fine, sticky sound, incredibly clear, drilled into C. Jenkins' ears. It was the sound of teeth crushing bones and tearing muscles, accompanied by a bone-chilling chewing and swallowing sound. Every sound was like a cold steel needle, brutally piercing C. Jenkins' nerve endings. All of C. Jenkins' blood froze solid the moment he heard that sound. His heart skipped a beat, then pounded wildly, uncontrollably against his ribs, making his eardrums throb. A cold chill instantly shot from his tailbone to the top of his head, causing a dense wave of goosebumps on his scalp. Breathing, he forgot to breathe. His lungs felt clamped by iron tongs, not a wisp of air could enter. Every muscle in his body was tensed to its limit, stiff as a stone thrown in the dead of winter, unable to move even a fingertip. Demons, man-eating, demons. The hideous, drooling images under Tanjiro's blade, the battle scenes that made him nervous or hot-blooded through the screen, were now completely shattered and overridden by this living, real-life scene emanating a strong smell of blood and death, right before his eyes. The hot-bloodedness on the screen turned into the truly nauseating flesh and blood before him. He stared fixedly at the hunched figure, his eyeballs bulging and bloodshot from extreme fear. His mind was blank, only one thought remained. Move. Move quickly. Get out of here. Run, you dead legs. But his body betrayed him, heavy as if filled with lead, nailed to the spot. The demon seemed to be eating with extreme concentration, its teeth grinding chewing sounds particularly jarring in the dead silent alley. It occasionally let out one or two satisfied, low growls. Time flowed sluggishly in extreme fear. Every second felt as long as a century. Cold sweat soaked C. Jenkins' thin undershirt, clinging to the cold ground, bringing an even deeper chill. Suddenly, the continuous, bone-chilling chewing sound stopped without warning. The entire alley fell into an eerie silence. Even the wind seemed to have frozen. The hunched figure's shoulder shrugging stopped. It tilted its head slightly, as if listening, or perhaps sensing some subtle change in the air. C. Jenkins' heart leapt into his throat, almost bursting out of his mouth. He held his breath, not daring to move his eyeballs even a fraction, staring fixedly at that back. Time seemed to freeze. Then, the demon's body began to turn, with an extremely slow, somewhat stiff posture. The moonlight gradually shifted, and shadows covered its turning cheek. Beneath the messy black hair, a small patch of pale skin was revealed. The skin was eerily smooth, utterly bloodless. Next, the outline of its jaw, with sharp lines. C. Jenkins' pupils suddenly contracted to pinprick size. He saw an eye. An eye revealed through the gaps in the messy hair. The whites of the eye were a cloudy yellow, crisscrossed with fine blood vessels, and in the center of that cloudiness, where the pupil should be, was a terrifying, solidified deep red like fresh blood. That red was more demonic, colder than any demon eye he had seen on screen, carrying a pure, inhuman appetite and cruelty. That blood-red eyeball precisely locked onto C. Jenkins, who was sprawled on the ground. "You're not dead," the demon's voice was hoarse and emotionless. These words plunged C. Jenkins into an ice cellar. His body completely froze, cold sweat soaking his clothes, an icy chill to the bone. Extreme fear overwhelmed him, his will to survive crushed. The demon slowly stood up, its movements sluggish. It stood with its back to the moonlight, casting a massive, distorted shadow. Its pale skin appeared even more lifeless in the shadows, its messy hair matted. It tilted its head, its single blood-red eye gleaming with inhuman greed, firmly locking onto C. Jenkins' trembling pupils, its gaze filled only with primal hunger. A strong, bloody stench surged forward, blocking C. Jenkins' nose and mouth. His stomach churned but he couldn't vomit, only staring fixedly. Dark red crumbs remained on the demon's lips, its chin and front soaked in viscous liquid. The silence was permeated with the predator's focus. C. Jenkins' mind was blank, only a scream of terror remained. Run! But his body was nailed down. The dilapidated walls seemed to squeeze and seal off his escape route. The demon's lips slowly curled into an inhuman arc, viscous blood drool dripping. It took a silent step. Its boot stepped into the viscous pool of blood, making a faint, squelching sound. This step felt like it was treading on C. Jenkins' heart. Who? C. Jenkins squeezed out a broken gasp, his entire body convulsing. His vision blurred and swam, his ears ringing sharply. The demon's distorted, magnified figure and burning blood-red eye seemed to be devouring him. The demon took a second step, its movements fluid and poised. The cold, putrid breath was already on C. Jenkins' face. The suffocatingly pure hunger flickering in that blood-red eye, mixed with the stench of rotting flesh and rust, assailed him, like a cold shroud, completely enveloping C. Jenkins. Time seemed to be compressed to a sharp point. Just a split second before that grayish-pale, blood-stained hand was about to touch C. Jenkins' throat. Boom! The desperation of impending death ultimately squeezed out the deepest, most primal instincts of the human body. A heart-wrenching desire to survive emerged from the depths of his soul. Move! His soul roared silently. It was no longer a command, but his body itself igniting. He didn't even think about direction, his brain overwhelmed by the single thought: escape. Get out of here. Ah ah ah. A broken scream, a mixture of fear, pain, and all his strength bursting forth, finally erupted from his tightly clenched teeth. It wasn't to embolden himself, but purely the release of high-pressure air. His legs kicked. Not a skillful exertion of force, but more like a drowning person's desperate flailing before death, brutally kicking the cold, damp ground beneath him with all his might. His hands also pushed back with all their strength. Whoosh! His body actually managed to roll backward, crookedly and in an extremely undignified posture, using that brute force. The moment he rolled away, the demon's grayish-pale, icy claw, with a whoosh of air, fiercely struck down, embedding itself with a splat deep into the viscous blood pool where C. Jenkins had just been lying, splashing mud and dark red. A hair's breadth escape. Escape. C. Jenkins didn't even have time to steady himself, scrambling on all fours like a beast with countless hunting rifles pointed at its hind legs, crawling and rolling towards the depths of the alley, in the direction the demon had come from. A desperate sprint. The fear had not subsided, instead, it was like 1,000 icy needles piercing his back. Adrenaline pumped frantically into his blood, making his heart pound like a raging engine, his ears filled only with the sound of the wind, his own gasps, and his heartbeat. Every step on the slippery ground could lead to a fall, his legs heavy as if filled with lead, aching and weak. His lungs burned, each inhale tearing at his throat, bringing with it a thick, almost tangible stench of blood. He dared not look back. He couldn't look back. The sound of pursuing footsteps. No, it couldn't be called footsteps. There was no normal sound of footsteps behind him, only an extremely faint, yet terrifyingly fast, whoosh, whoosh, sound of air being cut. Like wind, but more solid, colder than wind, carrying the howl of death, like a maggot clinging to bone, instantly closing the distance. C. Jinkin could even feel that bone-chilling cold licking at the back of his neck again. That nauseating smell almost clung to him. Impossible. This speed. His heart was filled with immense terror. How could a human outrun something like this? Fresh, quite fast. The hoarse voice was almost at his ear, cold breath sprayed on his neck, triggering a wave of desperate chills. The tone even carried a hint of cruel playfulness, like a cat toying with a mouse. A huge, irresistible force suddenly slammed into his right rear side. It felt like being hit by a high-speed refrigerated truck. Bang! C. Jinkin was thrown into the air, all the scenery before his eyes instantly turning into a chaotic swirl of dark and light lines. He didn't even feel much pain, only a sense of weightlessness from being completely dominated and thrown by an immense force. Immediately, his back hit the ground with a heavy thud, and excruciating pain suddenly erupted from the point of impact. His spine felt as if it would shatter into pieces. His internal organs were all squeezed together, making him feel suffocated to death. A mouthful of sweet-smelling blood suddenly surged into his throat, his vision darkened, golden stars danced, and he almost fainted. But a deeper fear instantly sobered him. Before he could gasp, before he could see clearly, a ghostly, heavy black shadow blocked the pale moonlight, bringing with it a strong stench of decay, and slammed down on him. He was pressed firmly to the ground, his chest squeezed, unable to breathe. Only that single eye, emitting a dark red glow and filled with pure desire, was inches away, fixed on his pupils. Gurgle, finally caught you. The muffled words were accompanied by the sticky sound of saliva. No. Don't. C. Jenkins screamed in despair, his hands flailing wildly, pushing, scratching at the cold, hard body on top of him. But it was useless. Like an ant trying to shake a tree. His fingernails scraped against the pale skin, leaving only a few insignificant white marks. The next second, an icy, iron-like claw, with abnormal precision, like a pair of iron tongs, grabbed his left arm, which he had raised in struggle, at the midpoint between his shoulder and elbow. Grip. The strength was incredibly immense. Crack. A low, clear, and bone-chilling snap. It wasn't the sound of skin tearing, but the sound of hard bone structure instantly deforming and breaking under immense external force. All of C. Jenkins' struggling movements suddenly froze. The world, at that moment, seemed to drain of all sound, all light, leaving only a complete blankness from the connection of his shoulder and arm, and the excruciating pain that immediately followed, suddenly exploding, burning his nerve endings. Ah! Ah ah ah! An indescribable wail tore through the dead silence of the night alley. All his muscles instantly spasmed and twitched. Sweat mixed with tears and saliva instantly smeared his face. His vision was distorting, spinning, a blurry crimson. He could clearly feel his left arm twisting at a completely unnatural angle, dangling limply, not dangling, but being lifted by that iron-like hand. His vision was almost momentarily paralyzed by the immense pain, and then he truly saw. To his left, at the edge of his vision, an arm hung there. A very familiar arm, clad in a sleeve. Only, the end of this arm was not connected to a shoulder, but to an icy demon claw. The excruciating pain continued to burn, engulfing everything. The warmth and strength of life, accompanied by the intense pain and fear, were rapidly draining from that huge gash. The demon's blood-red single eye looked with satisfaction at the hideous wound, at the warm blood gushing out. It slowly opened its mouth, revealing dense fangs and sticky strands of saliva. The intense pain nearly tore C. Jinkin apart. His vision was a bloody red, the world spun, and with every throb, the large wound was pulled, making him feel as if the warmth of life was gushing out. But just as he was about to fall apart from the pain and was enveloped by the cold embrace of death, a more primal, more violent surge erupted within him. He refused to give up. To his right, the only side he could still move, on the cold, damp ground, lay a dark green, grimy beer bottle. He didn't know which drunkard had left it there. Its rough body reflected a faint, cold light under the pale moonlight. Move. The instinct for survival overwhelmed the heart-wrenching pain, overriding the total exhaustion of his body. This wasn't thought, it was his body's final struggle against death. His remaining right hand, trembling violently from pain and fear, was suddenly yanked by an invisible string, unleashing its last bit of strength as he snatched up the heavy glass bottle. He had no time to aim, nor could he consider the consequences. His mind was left with a single thought, burning hot from agony and terror: smash it. Ah! A roar, mixed with pain, despair, and a final madness, was squeezed from his throat, accompanying his arm as he swung it with all his might. Bang! A dull thud and a piercing crash suddenly exploded in the dead silence of the alley. The beer bottle shattered in his hand, glass shards flying everywhere. Cold beer, mixed with the blood gushing from his cut palm, drenched his head and face. The heavy bottom of the bottle, carrying the full weight of his body and his dying strength, smashed squarely onto the hard, cold skull of the monstrous thing that was gnawing on his severed arm. Crack! It was the sound of the bottle completely shattering, but it seemed to be mixed with a duller impact. The monster's movements suddenly froze. It stopped gnawing. The eerie chewing and swallowing sounds ceased. The monstrous claw clutching his severed arm even loosened its grip ever so slightly. It seemed completely taken aback that this prey, with an arm torn off and nearly dead from pain, could still manage such a non-threatening but surprisingly sudden counterattack. The monstrous face, smeared with C. Jenkins' blood and shredded flesh from his severed arm, slowly lifted, stiff with a hint of disbelief. Its blood-red vertical pupils in its murky yellow eyes, for the first time, clearly reflected C. Jenkins' face, twisted and deformed by extreme pain and madness. A second of confusion seemed to flash in its gaze. Now, C. Jenkins' mind was blank, only the fire of survival burned. He couldn't feel the pain of his right hand being cut by glass, nor could he see the blood and grime on his face. The instant the monster froze was his last and only chance. He didn't stop for a second. Just as the bottle shattered and the monstrous face lifted, he gripped the remaining neck of the glass bottle, jagged and sharp-edged like fangs. That pointed break was now his only weapon. Aha! He used every last ounce of his strength, arching his body upward, disregarding the dead weight of the monster pressing on him, and ignoring the excruciating pain and gushing blood from the severed left shoulder that threatened to make him faint. He plunged the grotesque broken glass neck in his hand toward the monstrous face, those blood-red eyes that terrified him to his core, with all his might, as if his life depended on it. PFF'd. A sickening thud as it pierced flesh. A viscous, cold substance immediately splattered out. The sharp broken glass plunged deep. The location, just below the murky yellow eye and blood-red pupil, it was savagely wedged into the pale, bluish cheek. Hiss. Gurgle. A sharp, painful, and furious shriek erupted from the monster's throat for the first time. No longer a hoarse whisper, it was like the howl of a wounded beast. Its single blood-red eye suddenly widened, its pupil contracting violently. Immediately after, a viscous, strangely colored liquid poured frantically from the wound pierced by the glass and from its undamaged eye. It violently shook its head, trying to dislodge the glass embedded in its face, its entire body shaking and convulsing intensely. It clutched its face, its single eye tightly shut, while the other was obscured by the glass and gushing liquid, completely blinding it. The monstrous thing, heavy as a mountain, pressing on C. Jenkins, suddenly lost its grip as it struggled and thrashed in agony. Run! This thought struck C. Jenkins' fading consciousness like lightning. He didn't bother to pull out the glass bottle neck, nor did he care about the volcanic pain and gushing blood from his severed left shoulder. His remaining right hand frantically pushed off the cold, slippery ground, his core exploding with its last bit of strength. He scrambled and rolled, breaking free from beneath the temporarily blinded, pained, and enraged monster. His vision was dim, his ears buzzed like a siren, and every breath he took carried a heavy scent of blood and the sensation of his windpipe tearing. The intense pain and the cold, weak feeling from blood loss at his severed left shoulder devoured him frantically. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop even if he died. He clambered to his feet, using both hands and feet, his posture staggering like a broken puppet with cut strings. He stumbled, running with the fastest speed he could manage, toward the deeper part of the dark alley, to the nearby corner piled with junk, running for his life. Behind him, the monster's painful and furious roars pursued him like a ghost. Si Jinkin felt like a broken ship about to sink in a stormy sea. Each heavy step landed in a viscous pool of blood and filth, making a heart-stopping, squelch sound. The roars behind him were like maggots clinging to bone, growing closer and closer, their icy killing intent almost piercing his spine. The alley grew narrower further in, the mottled walls on either side seemingly pressing inward, threatening to completely seal off this last escape route. The air was suffocatingly foul, a mixture of the sour stench of rotting garbage, the heavy smell of blood, and the decaying aura emanating from the monster behind him. Just as he felt his lungs were about to burst, his legs grew heavy as if filled with lead, and his consciousness wavered on the brink of agony and dizziness. He rounded the corner piled high with old furniture and discarded junk. Before his eyes, the space suddenly opened up. It wasn't light, but a deeper darkness, yet it carried a strange sense of the end. This was the deepest part of a dead-end alley, with 3 sides of towering, cold, impenetrable walls. It was filled with garbage accumulated for who knew how many years, emitting an even more pungent stench than outside. A small patch of pale moonlight struggled to spill down from the top of the high walls, exactly illuminating an object on top of the garbage pile. That thing. Si Jinkin's steps suddenly halted, not from despair, but from an incredible shock originating deep within his soul. As a seasoned otaku who had been immersed in ACG culture for many years, that shape, that outline, that eerie non-gold, non-stone luster shimmering in the moonlight, he recognized it instantly. The stone mask. It was the forbidden stone mask from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the one that could grant humans superhuman strength but also transform them into vampires. It lay there abruptly and eerily on top of the garbage pile, as if it had existed there since time immemorial, or as if fate had specifically prepared it as his last trump card. Moonlight flowed over its ancient and intricate patterns, the lines seemed to breathe, to whisper, emitting an icy, seductive, yet primordial aura of power. In an instant, all the intense pain, the heart-wrenching pain of his severed arm, the stinging pain of his glass-cut palm, the cold weakness brought by blood loss, all seemed to be paused. An indescribable ecstasy and an unbelievable sense of absurdity crashed into Si Jinkin's brain. The fiend behind him had already reached the corner. Its heavy, brutal footsteps and suppressed roars, thick with bloody foam, were clearly audible. Its sole remaining bloodshot eye gleamed with a predatory ferocity in the darkness, locking onto Si Jinkin's back. But at this moment, Si Jinkin was no longer flustered. An unprecedented, icy calm enveloped him. He didn't even immediately grab the mask. Instead, he slowly turned around, facing the approaching fiend that exuded the aura of death. His severed arm was still dripping blood, the drops making faint, drip-drop, sounds as they hit the cold ground. He raised his remaining right hand, and with fingers stained with his own blood, reached for the stone mask on top of the garbage pile. He didn't grab the mask itself. Instead, he dipped his fingertip into the warm blood flowing from his severed arm, and then, very slowly, very precisely, let a drop of blood fall into the central indentation of the stone mask, the one symbolizing the third eye. The blood dripped. Z's. An extremely faint, yet incredibly clear sound, like some creature being awakened. The mechanism on the back of the stone mask was activated. Several sharp, slender, metallic glowing bone spikes, like a viper's fangs, instantly shot out from the holes on the back of the mask. Their grotesque appearance was exactly as depicted in the JoJo manga. It was real. Confirmed. This was no illusion, no figment of imagination. This was the key to non-human power. The corner of Si Jinkin's mouth slowly curved into an almost insane arc. All fear, all pain, all despair, at this moment, transformed into fuel, igniting the raging flames of resolve in his eyes. He no longer looked at the stone mask. Instead, he cast his cold and sharp gaze back towards the fiend that was now less than 5 meters in front of him. The fiend clearly saw the stone mask as well. For the first time, a trace of primal fear and confusion towards unknown power appeared in its sole remaining blood-red vertical pupil. But it was quickly enraged by Si Jinkin's provocatively calm gaze. It bared its fanged, blood-stained mouth and let out a hoarse, grating, mocking growl. Ha ha! After witnessing the absolute disparity between us, you choose not to scurry away, like a lowly insect, but instead, actively approach me. Foolish, pathetic, flesh. Its voice was like sandpaper rubbing against bone, every syllable was filled with contempt for its prey and greed for flesh. C. Jinkin listened quietly, the insane curve on his face growing clearer. He did not retreat, instead, he stepped forward, facing the fiend's oppressive gaze. 1 step. 2 steps. He stopped when he was only 2 meters away from the fiend. The air in the depths of the alley seemed to solidify. The moonlight was pale, and the garbage pile exuded a decaying stench. The smell of blood and killing intent were thick and unyielding. C. Jinkin took a deep breath. The air was cold, with the taste of rust, yet exceptionally steady. His voice was not loud, but exceptionally clear and firm, piercing through the dead silent alley, carrying a heavy and resolute tone, like a pronouncement of fate. Fiend. He spoke, his voice low, like a volcano about to erupt. Human power is limited. His gaze passed over the hideous fiend before him, as if penetrating time and space, seeing all the struggles and powerlessness of his short life. What I've learned from my short life is. He paused slightly, each word like a heavy hammer striking the silence. The more one plays with schemes, the more likely they are to fail due to unforeseen circumstances, ultimately, leading to self-destruction. His voice suddenly rose, carrying a soul-piercing roar, declaring a complete farewell to his human identity. If I want to transcend all this, if I want to defeat a monster like you. C. Jinkin suddenly raised his hand, and with his right hand, stained with his own blood and the fiend's, he grabbed the stone mask from the top of the garbage pile. A cold, heavy sensation came over him. The ancient patterns on the mask seemed to resonate with the blood in his palm. He no longer hesitated. I must become a being beyond human. Under the fiend's pupils, which instantly constricted at his words, and amidst its roars of fury, shock, and a hint of disbelief as it realized what was about to happen, C. Jinkin resolutely and fiercely slammed the stone mask, which carried forbidden power and a curse, onto his face. The moment the mask touched his skin, the blood flowing from his severed arm, as if summoned, surged wildly towards the mask. The blood quickly soaked into the ancient patterns of the stone mask, activating the evil power dormant within it. I'm giving up my humanity. Fiend. Accompanied by this final, soul-shaking declaration, the sharp bone spikes on the back of the stone mask, driven by C. Jinkin's blood, shot out like living things, carrying a cold metallic luster and the resolve to pierce through everything, fiercely stabbing into his head. Excruciating pain. A pain more pure, more profound than a severed arm. It wasn't the tearing of flesh, but the disintegration and reconstruction originating from the very core of his soul. The bone spikes on the back of the stone mask, cold, hard, and resolute in their ability to pierce through anything, savagely plunged into C. Jinkin's skull. The sensation was like several red-hot steel rods being hammered into his brain with immense force, instantly igniting every nerve and detonating the most primal fear deep within his soul, along with an indescribable tremor. Why? A non-human roar, filled with extreme agony, tore through his throat, but this roar lasted less than half a second before being replaced by an even more terrifying transformation. Buzz. An indescribable, cold, and violent torrent of energy, using the penetrating bone spikes as a bridge, brutally surged into every corner of his body. It wasn't a warm current of healing, but a violent scour, tear, and reorganization. He felt his blood boiling. No, it wasn't boiling, it was something more fundamental burning. All the blood vessels in his body were expanding and twisting, as if they would burst the next second. The blood gushing from his severed arm no longer flowed weakly, but was frantically sucked by an invisible force, pouring back into the stone mask, becoming fuel for that ancient evil ritual. His vision exploded. The originally blurry world, dimmed by blood loss, was forcibly torn open the moment the bone spikes pierced him. The pallid moonlight suddenly became dazzling, every detail infinitely magnified and infinitely clear. The veins of rotten vegetable leaves in the garbage heap, the particles of peeling paint on the wall, the dust motes suspended in the air, every tiny detail was revealed. He could even see the muscle fibers at the wound of his severed arm still twitching slightly under the moonlight. His hearing was exploding. The demon's low growl, filled with fury and surprise, was instantly decomposed into countless noisy syllables, like innumerable blunt knives scraping his eardrums. The vague clamor of the distant city, Car horns, faint human voices, even the rustling of rats deep in the sewers, surged like a tide, assaulting his fragile auditory nerves. The slightest whisper of wind deep in the alley, brushing through his blood-stained hair, was also as clear as thunder. His sense of smell and taste were completely distorted and amplified. The stench emanating from the garbage heap was no longer a single odor of decay, but was broken down into countless pungent, nauseating molecular information, frantically rushing into his nasal cavity. The heavy smell of blood became incredibly sweet, carrying a bone-deep allure, strongly stimulating his salivary glands, making him almost unable to resist licking the blood flowing from his wound. At the same time, an ancient and cold stony scent originating from the stone mask itself, mixed with the metallic tang, also domineeringly occupied his senses. His body was screaming. Every cell was wailing. A dense, clacking sound came from deep within his bones, as if being forged and reshaped by an invisible giant hammer. Muscle fibers tore under the impact of the energy torrent and then regenerated frantically, bringing waves of tearing and itching pain. His skin became abnormally sensitive. The cold air brushing against him felt like countless fine needles. The severe pain from his severed arm not only didn't disappear but was ignited by this power, a burning sensation deep into his bones, yet strangely accompanied by a new, powerful numbness. His consciousness was sinking and burning. Fragments of past human memories, like broken slides, flashed back rapidly, distorted, and then were mercilessly crushed under the onslaught of violent energy. Childhood, friends, family, those once warm or mundane moments now seemed incredibly distant and fragile, devoured and covered by a more primal, wilder, and colder will. The instinct to survive was infinitely magnified, twisted into a more naked hunger for power, for blood, for existence itself. Who? C. Jenkins' throat emitted an unintelligible, beast-like growl. He trembled violently, like pig iron thrown into a furnace, undergoing a radical transformation in extreme agony. The stone mask on his face seemed to come alive, the cold mask tightly adhered to his skin, its ancient patterns pulsing faintly like blood vessels, greedily sucking his life essence, and continuously injecting that forbidden, non-human power. He bent his body, his remaining right hand desperately clawing at the ground, knuckles white from exertion, fingernails even embedded in the cracks of the cold flagstones. Each twitch was accompanied by the cracking of bones and the creeping of muscles. The demon, close at hand, had long lost its previous rage and mockery in its sole remaining blood-red vertical pupil, replaced by intense horror and a hint of instinctive fear, as if facing a superior predator. It watched this human, no, he could no longer be called a human, watched the terrifying transformation happening to him. The blood constantly being sucked from the severed arm wound, seemingly wreathed in black chi, the muscle contours wriggling like living things beneath his skin, the mouth under the mask emitting non-human screams, and those eyes, those pupils, cold, sharp, and gleaming with a non-human red light, projected through the eyeholes of the stone mask. Danger. Fatal danger. The demon's simple brain, whose instincts were killing and devouring, for the first time clearly issued a top-level alert. It even involuntarily took half a step back, the fierce glint in its single eye replaced by uncertainty. It let out a low, threatening growl from its throat, but it sounded more like a blustering warning. Just as it hesitated. Click. A crisp, light sound, like cracking porcelain, came from C. Jenkins' face. The stone mask, that artifact bearing ancient curses and power, after having absorbed enough blood and completed the final ritual, actually cracked on its own. Immediately, like a chain reaction, fine cracks instantly spread across the entire mask. Then, under the demon's astonished gaze, the mask, like weathered rock, silently shattered and peeled away, turning into a handful of off-white powder that rustled down, mixing with the bloodstains on C. Jenkins' face, and disappearing. Beneath the mask, a pale, handsome face was revealed. Seeing this, the demon no longer hesitated, quickly approached C. Jenkins, and threw a punch. Because C. Jenkins had just transformed, his defense was not yet very high, and the demon's punch went straight through him. And C. Jenkins, taking advantage of the demon having pierced his chest. When the demon saw how easily it had pierced C. Jenkins' chest, the fear in its heart vanished. I thought it was something, but it was defeated by me in one go, he scoffed. C. Jenkins, on the other hand, showed no fear, instead, the corners of his mouth turned up. Boxer briefs, boxer briefs. With that, he raised his hand and plunged it into the demon's neck. The demon showed a pained expression, its skin rapidly shriveling, eventually turning into a dried husk, and falling to the ground with a thud. After draining the demon, his empty left arm began to sprout granulation tissue, and soon his previously lost left arm grew back. The taste of a demon is so delicious, I'm absolutely thrilled. After his fit of madness, he began to carefully examine his body. This world was most likely Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, which he had been watching before his sudden death. He knew that the blood of demons in this world contained Muzan's blood. And Muzan's blood carried curses, he didn't want to become that scumbag's employee. However, after examining his body, he found nothing of the sort. Instead, he felt a profound vitality. He understood that Muzan's weak curse simply couldn't affect him. How useless, Muzan. After despising Muzan inwardly, he remembered the pile of small breads he had seen when he first arrived. If he ate them all, he would definitely become stronger. Si Jinkin now possessed not only the power of a vampire but also the unique power of a demon from Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba. And the demons in this world grow stronger the more they eat. After making his decision, he didn't linger and went to eat those small breads. After Si Jinkin arrived at the spot where he had been, he ate all the small bread scattered on the ground. However, what made him extremely angry was that the demon from earlier had completely wasted food, throwing small bread everywhere. What an unhygienic demon. I, Si Jinkin, am the most hygienic. After eating the small bread that still seemed clean, he left, not touching any of the dirty ones. No sooner had he left than a person wearing a Kocho Haori arrived at the scene. Did I still arrive a step too late? Si Jinkin was hiding in a house because it was almost dawn, and he had already implanted flesh buds into the original owner of the house. Now, the owner was searching for suitable subordinates and intelligence about the city for him. He observed the movements outside through a crack in the window, silently planning his next move. As dawn approached and the city's noises grew clearer, he knew he had to find more clues quickly to survive within the demon's sphere of influence. Soon after, the owner of the house returned, bringing some useful intelligence. Through the intelligence provided, Si Jinkin roughly deduced that this world was indeed Demon Slayer core, and not some strange, eerie world. With his understanding of this world, his room for maneuver greatly increased. However, he still didn't know what period of time it was currently. He recalled a video he had watched in his previous life that analyzed the story of this world, stating that it began in Taisho Year 1 or Taisho Year 2. The house owner had also told him that it wasn't yet Taisho, so there was still a long time before everything began. However, the plot of this period was vague, and he didn't know the specific timeline. Therefore, he still knew nothing about this world's intelligence. Soon, night fell again, and Si Jinkin had to go out to eat small bread. He first found the homes of the people who had been recommended for flesh bud implantation and implanted flesh buds into all of them. His current goal was to establish his own intelligence network to gather intelligence for himself. He had a premonition that the Asia Red Stone definitely existed in this world, because he had already found the stone mask. Moreover, with a larger intelligence network, he could better grasp the situation of the Demon Slayer core and Muzan's intelligence. He also had a premonition that if he ate Muzan like a small bread, he would be one step closer to becoming a JO-level being and find the red stone more easily. Just as he implanted flesh buds into the last recommended person, he also discovered a demon. After he drained him dry, a gentle female voice suddenly came from behind him. Mr. Demon, are you looking for someone? The voice, soft and gentle, drilled into Si Jinkin's abnormally keen eardrums, carrying a hint of a smile that was both present and absent, yet it felt like a cold serpent's tongue licking his spine. Si Jinkin's body instantly tensed, like a fully drawn bowstring. In his inhuman perception, every rustle of wind and blade of grass within dozens of meters should have been as clear as a thunderstorm. Yet, the owner of this voice seemed to appear out of thin air. It wasn't until she spoke that her faint life chi, like ice dropped into boiling water, suddenly created ripples in his expanded sensory domain. He hadn't even caught a single sound of her approaching footsteps, not one iota. Astonishment and a sudden surge of offended rage exploded like boiling oil in his cold veins. He spun around abruptly, his remaining right hand's 5 fingers instantly transforming into sharp claws, letting out a shriek that tore through the air. He instinctively lunged fiercely towards the source of the voice. His movements were as swift as a ghost. However, screech. What the sharp claws tore through was only cold, damp air. The figure, at the moment he turned, had already floated back half a step, as light as an illusion scattered by the wind. The moonlight sparingly outlined a slender, hazy silhouette. Most striking was the houri draped over her shoulders. On a dark background, countless vibrant butterfly shadows, as if poised to take flight, subtly shimmered in the dark night. She wore a gentle, almost amiable smile on her face, but her pair of purple eyes, glittering with an inhumanly cold and clear light in the darkness, were like 2 meticulously carved pieces of ice, piercing through the obstruction of the night and precisely locking onto his face. There was no trace of fear in that gaze, only a kind of scrutinizing, venomous, gentleness, as if observing an object. Good reaction. She spoke again, her voice still soft and melodious, as if praising a newly acquired toy. But the coldness between her words made the air in the alley seem to congeal with a layer of frost. It seems tonight's cleanup crew isn't just me. However, her tone elongated slightly, with a hint of playfulness, making a mess of a place someone else has painstakingly cleaned, and casually discarding trash isn't a good habit, Mr. Demon. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze sweeping over the dried corpse of the demon on the ground, which resembled a broken puppet, then slowly moved to see Jenkins' right hand, stained with dark red blood. The sweet, metallic scent of fresh human blood, left from forcibly implanting flesh buds, still lingered on his fingertips. C. Jenkins' pupils instantly contracted to pinpoints. That gaze brought not oppression, but something sharper, a chilling sense of being seen through. She saw it. She not only saw him dispose of that demon. The nascent, violent power within him, a mix of vampire and demon, roared, thoroughly enraged by this sudden scrutiny and casual evaluation. HMPH, a suppressed, threatening growl rumbled from deep within his throat, his fangs glinting chillingly in the pale moonlight. He stared intently at the cold purple eyes in the shadows, the predatory glint in his own eyes flickering wildly. This suddenly appearing, advanced small bread, emanating a strange aura, this Hashira named Kocho Shinobu, was definitely not someone to be trifled with. Kocho Shinobu's figure vanished instantly, and the next moment, chilling killing intent was upon him. The slender Nichiren blade was silent, like a poisonous bee's sting, striking directly at C. Jenkins' heart with deadly speed and precision. Fast. Too fast. Far exceeding C. Jenkins' nascent, still sluggish reaction limit at this moment. He couldn't dodge. The thought had barely flashed through C. Jenkins' mind, which was somewhat muddled by the impact of the violent power, when the cold blade tip had already touched his skin. He could even feel the strong sense of threat against demons that the special metal brought. PFF'd. The Nichiren blade pierced his chest without hindrance, and excruciating pain followed. HMPH. C. Jenkins grunted, his body swaying from the impact. Heart pierced. It didn't matter. He was not like those ordinary demons, as long as his head was intact. This small injury would heal in an instant. He could even feel his muscle fibers writhing frantically, trying to push the annoying blade out of his body. However, at the exact moment Kocho Shinobu's blade pierced his body. Space rupture eye stab. C. Jenkins' eyes suddenly widened. 2 high-pressure liquid streams, like invisible bullets, shot out with a piercing sound, at close range and zero delay. Their target was Kocho Shinobu's head. A flicker of genuine astonishment finally crossed Kocho Shinobu's cold purple eyes. She had completely underestimated this opponent's incredible attack method. Such close range, such a sudden attack. With her honed reflexes, she sharply turned her head to dodge. Hiss. Hiss. 2 streams of liquid grazed her cheek, leaving faint lines of blood. But one of them precisely pierced her right shoulder socket, where she held the blade. Ah! A suppressed cry of pain escaped Kocho Shinobu's lips, and the slender Nichiren blade instantly slipped from her grasp. The intense pain instantly numbed her entire right arm, and her body staggered backward from the impact. A flicker of wild joy and cruelty flashed in C. Jenkins' eyes. He had succeeded. He abruptly raised his hand, ready to counterattack and tear this dangerous, small bread, to shreds. But the next second, an intense burning sensation and sharp pain came from his eyes. His vision was instantly covered in a bloody red, followed by complete darkness. Blindness. The price of using this move. Tisk. Troublesome. Si Jinkin growled, his movements forced to a halt. However, at the moment this darkness descended, the part of his bloodline belonging to the demon of the Demon Slayer core world surged wildly. The nearly immortal power characteristic originating from Kibutsuji Muzan began to rapidly repair the optic nerves damaged by his use of space rupture eye stab. This blindness was much shorter than he had anticipated. In just one breath, like a receding tide, the bloody red in front of him rapidly dissipated, and clear images flooded back into his vision. He saw Kocho Shinobu clutching her profusely bleeding right shoulder, her face slightly pale, rapidly retreating. Her left hand had already lightning fast drawn another spare short blade, her eyes as cold as ever, but the effortless gentleness was completely gone. Si Jinkin grinned savagely. The wound in his chest, pierced by the Nichiren blade, was healing at a visible speed, muscles writhing, slowly pushing the blade out. His newly regenerated left arm moved, emitting a crisp sound of bone friction. It seems, Miss Cleanup Crew, your tool isn't working too well. He licked the corner of his mouth, the crimson glow in his eyes growing brighter. Kocho Shinobu's purple pupils abruptly constricted. Si Jinkin's provocation and the rapidly healing wound on his chest stimulated her nerves. The penetrating wound on her right shoulder burned, and numbness spread along her arm. The specially made Nichiren blade, after slipping from her hand, did not fall to the ground. Instead, her left hand shot out like lightning, precisely catching the blade's hilt in an awkward posture to maintain its threat. Blood dripped from her fair fingertips, making a faint sound in the dead silent alley. Tool. The characteristic smile on her lips remained unchanged, her voice cold. It seems your understanding of cleaning is still at the level of destruction, Mr. Demon. Before her words finished, her figure moved again. Not a direct charge, but a light trajectory, instantly circling to Si Jinkin's left side, the direction of his newly regenerated left arm. The Nichiren blade, held reversed in her left hand, transformed into a streak of light. No longer a thrust, but a cunning and vicious upward slash, aimed directly at Si Jinkin's carotid artery. On the blade, an extremely faint purple mist permeated, shimmering in the moonlight. Si Jinkin's newly regenerated left arm felt a slight stiffness, and his blocking speed was ultimately a fraction too slow. The cold blade easily cut through his tough skin, deeply embedding itself in the muscles of his neck. Excruciating pain followed, but even more deadly was the bone-chilling toxin that immediately invaded with the blade. The purple mist, like a living thing, coiled around and instantly seeped into the wound, bringing a fierce burning sensation and terrifying numbness far exceeding the blade wound. His body's repair speed suddenly stalled. Poison. Si Jinkin was furious and shocked, abruptly retreating. The wound on his neck, under the erosion of the toxin, not only failed to heal but also developed a strange purple hue around its edges, and the numbness rapidly spread throughout his body. He forcibly drove the violent power within his body to suppress the toxin, and the repairing muscle fibers fiercely resisted the invading poison. A faint sizzling sound came from the wound, and subtle purple smoke emerged. Kocho Shinobu did not pursue. She gracefully widened the distance, her left hand holding her Nichiren blade steadily pointed at Si Jinkin, and the wound on her right shoulder slowly stopped bleeding. Quite perceptive, aren't you? Her voice remained gentle but devoid of warmth. However, my cleanup has always been quite thorough. Taking advantage of the moment the poison was temporarily suppressed and the numbness slightly receded, a fierce glint erupted in Si Jinkin's eyes. He no longer relied on his regenerating limbs. The 5 fingers of his remaining right hand plunged violently into the wound on his neck, which had been cut open by the poisoned blade. PFF'd. Fresh blood mixed with a strange purple venom spurted out. But he was not harming himself, rather, he was using this intense pain and gushing blood as a medium. Bloodline strangulation. Si Jinkin roared. The splashing blood did not fall to the ground but eerily condensed and stretched in midair, transforming into dozens of blood threads as fine as hair but incredibly tough. These blood threads, as if alive, carried his violent power and the poison that had not been fully suppressed, instantly weaving into a deadly net that descended upon Kocho Shinobu, who was several meters away. The range was so vast that it almost covered all her evasion space. Kocho Shinobu's cold purple pupils finally showed intense fluctuations for the first time. She had completely underestimated that the opponent could use his own blood and the invading poison to launch such a bizarre and wide-ranging counterattack. The net of blood threads emitted a strong bloody smell and strange energy fluctuations, and its speed was astonishingly fast. The death net woven from blood threads descended. It carried a strong stench of blood and violent power, and it also contained the toxicity of C. Jinkin's body, which was fiercely fighting against the invading poison, intending to crush everything within its range. Kocho Shinobu's figure appeared exceptionally slender under the shadow of the blood net. Her purple pupils were instantly replaced by an icy calmness. In a flash, she made a decision. A head-on confrontation was the worst option. Tisk! With a soft exclamation, she stomped her left foot on the ground. Her body, as if pulled by invisible threads, swept backward and upward at an incredible angle. Her speed burst to its extreme, just barely grazing the edge of the contracting, strangling blood net. A few strands of severed hair drifted silently down. She landed gracefully, almost without any pause. Ignoring the intense pain and numbness in her right shoulder, the Nichiren blade, held in a reverse grip in her left hand, instantly switched to a forward grip, and the faint purple, deadly aura on the blade's tip suddenly intensified. Her figure vanished again, this time in a straight thrust. The target was still C. Jinkin's heart. Her speed was even faster than before, carrying a resolute determination to kill. The poisoned blade tore through the air, striking directly at the target. The poisoned blade tip, precise and ruthless, carried Kocho Shinobu's icy killing intent, just inches away from C. Jinkin's heart. A flicker of certainty crossed her purple eyes, it was over. Just as the poisoned blade was about to pierce his flesh. Cold. C. Jinkin uttered a low, chilling syllable. Centered on C. Jinkin, a terrifying, absolute zero-like cold chi suddenly erupted. The air instantly condensed, emitting a grating cracking sound. Visible frost spread wildly at an incredible speed, instantly covering a several-foot radius around him. Kocho Shinobu's lightning-fast figure abruptly froze. Her action of thrusting the blade was forcibly frozen in midair. Icy white frost climbed like a living thing onto her arm, her haori, and her astonished face. That poisoned Nichiren blade, just 3 inches from C. Jinkin's heart, could no longer advance an inch. A thick, crystal-clear layer of ice completely encased her, along with the deadly poisoned blade, transforming her into an ice sculpture frozen in a thrusting posture. The last thing that flickered in her eyes was an incredulous horror, which was then solidified by the eternal ice. HMPH, C. Jinkin let out a cold snort. The wound on his neck, cut by the poisoned blade, stopped worsening under the suppression of the cold chi, and his demon's regeneration ability slowly but continuously began to fight the poison and repair the wound. He walked in front of the frozen Kocho Shinobu, looking at the beautiful face, solidified in astonishment, within the ice crystal. He extended his remaining right hand, and a trace of dark red energy condensed at his fingertip. The energy wriggled like a living thing, forming a tiny, bud-like tissue. He unhesitatingly pressed his fingertip onto Kocho Shinobu's frozen forehead. The dark red bud easily penetrated the solid ice, silently merging into Kocho Shinobu's glabella like a drop of water dissolving into a sponge. Beneath the ice layer, a very faint, almost imperceptible dark red glow seemed to flash briefly in the depths of her frozen purple eyes, then returned to its icy, frozen state. C. Jinkin withdrew his hand, looking at the frozen Hashira, a cold curve appearing at the corner of his mouth. Cleaning. Trash. Now, you are also my tool, cleaner, young miss. Kocho Shinobu's body stiffly moved under C. Jinkin's cold gaze. The bone-chilling cold chi did not seem to have completely dissipated, but what made her feel even more piercing was the tiny yet undeniable source of command at the back of her neck, that dark red bud embedded in her glabella. It was like a red-hot brand, emitting an unquestionable command deep within her consciousness. Go, heal, she heard her own cold, unruffled voice, as if repeating a predetermined program. This was not a request, it was a compulsion branded onto her nerves. Her body moved against her will. Every step pulled at the excruciating wound on her right shoulder, which had been pierced by high-pressure liquid. Every breath brought a tearing, burning pain and numbness from the wound on her neck, which had been cut by the poisoned blade and then eroded by the cold chi. Under the moonlight, the figure draped in a houri with flowing butterfly patterns moved like a puppet controlled by invisible threads, stumbling and silent, through the deserted alleyways. In the depths of her purple eyes, the frozen horror had receded, replaced by surging pain and humiliation that almost consumed her. Every pulse of the wound on her right shoulder brought agonizing pain, like countless red-hot needles stirring in her bone seams. The impact from the void-rending eye sting not only tore her flesh but also left behind some destructive energy, hindering healing. The wound on her neck was even worse. The combined erosion of poison and cold chi made the muscle tissue there seem to rot silently, and every slight turn brought sharp numbness and a burning sensation, reminding her of the cost of failure. But the physical pain was far less than 1/10,000th of the pain deep within her consciousness. She could think clearly, every thought was perfectly lucid. She could feel every injury and pain in her body, recall every detail of the battle, and clearly perceive the cold brand left in her consciousness by the being named Si Jinkin, that bud. It did not devour her mind, but it was like a sharp sword hanging over her soul, making every autonomous thought accompanied by the fear of being forcibly twisted. She knew where she was going, knew what she was doing, but this, knowing, was not of her own will, but a command forcibly implanted. This lucid, forced obedience was more suffocating and despairing than any mental control. She, Kocho Shinobu, one of the Hashira, had become the enemy's tool, a puppet with thoughts but unable to resist. She numbly walked towards the nearby mansion guarded by the Wisteria family crest. That symbol of shelter and safety now appeared incredibly dazzling in her eyes. The people in the mansion were alarmed, seeing it was her. Although covered in blood and with unstable chi, her iconic purple eyes were still cold, and they immediately respectfully led her into the quietest side room, offering medicine and clean water, not daring to ask a single question. Sitting in the quiet room, the air was filled with the faint, unique scent of wisteria. But this scent was useless to her at this moment. She mechanically treated her wounds, her movements precise but lifeless. Every touch to her injuries brought intense pain, making the cold brand deep within her consciousness even clearer. She could feel the presence of the bud. It was like a deeply buried tumor, connected to that monster, capable of issuing a fatal command again at any moment. The feeling of humiliation, like a cold tide, crashed against her nerves again and again. She had been a hunter, a cleaner, but now she had become a manipulated prey. Even her wounds needed to be treated under the enemy's command. This clear realization made her heart feel as if it were repeatedly pierced by countless ice shards, numb with pain, yet unable to faint. The healing process was short and agonizing. When the basic treatment was complete, the command deep within her consciousness silently sounded again, clear and cold, return to Butterfly Mansion. She stood up without any hesitation, not even saying a word to the people in the mansion, merely nodding slightly in acknowledgement. Her posture still carried the Hashira's aloofness, but only she knew that this movement also carried a hint of stiffness driven by command. She pushed open the door and once again merged into the night. The road stretched beneath her feet, and familiar sights receded. Butterfly Mansion, the home she had personally established, filled with the scent of herbs, a place for injured Demon Slayer Corps members to rest in peace, and a place where she had poured countless efforts, had never felt so distant and heavy as it did now. With every step closer, the pain in her heart deepened. The lights of Butterfly Mansion glowed in the distance, warm and familiar. It was her fortress, her starting point and refuge for fighting demons and protecting the weak. However, at this moment, she was like a traitor carrying a deadly plague, leading this fatal threat, the bud deeply implanted in her body, and the terrifying entity behind it, to this safest, most inviolable holy land. She could see the surprised and then worried expressions on the faces of the Kakushi members guarding the gate when they saw her. She could imagine the relieved smiles that the recovering Demon Slayer Corps members inside, the children she regarded as siblings, might show upon her return. This warmth and trust now felt like a red-hot iron searing her heart. I'm back, carrying inescapable shackles, carrying a hidden danger that could destroy this place at any moment. The pain in her heart reached its peak. That lucid, forced sense of obedience clashed violently with her deep love and responsibility for Butterfly Mansion. Humiliation, fear, anger, despair, all these emotions churned beneath her icy mask. She was still Kocho Shinobu, her thoughts were perfectly clear, but her actions no longer belonged to her. Returning to Butterfly Mansion, this place that once represented absolute safety and control, now became her lucid purgatory, a fortress about to be personally contaminated and threatened by her existence. The door of the Butterfly Mansion was pushed open, and warm light and the familiar scent of herbs wafted out. The hidden member on guard saw her, and the worry on his face instantly overshadowed his routine respect. Kocho Shinobu didn't stop, walking straight to her quiet room, each step treading on the thorns in her heart. At the same time, in a dark stronghold far from the Butterfly Mansion, C. Jinkin's neck wound had mostly healed, leaving only a faint purple poison mark. He sat on a simple tatami mat, eyes closed. Through the flesh bud deeply embedded in Kocho Shinobu's glabella, he could clearly sense her forcibly suppressed pain, humiliation, and the scent of a demon slayer's home within the Butterfly Mansion that he detested. A cold arc crept onto his lips. Good. Pain and clear-headed obedience, this was exactly what he needed. He needed her alive, as a living chess piece he had buried in the heart of the demon slayer core. His consciousness, following the link of the flesh bud, sent new, cold, and direct commands to Kocho Shinobu in the distance. Obtain intelligence. Utilize her authority as a Hashira to review recent Demon Slayer Corps patrol deployments, casualty reports, and key markings of suspected demon activity areas. Resource mobilization. Under the pretense of researching new demon poisons or replenishing battle losses, request wisteria extract, rare medicinal herbs, refined steel, and other supplies from the hidden Department of Logistics. A portion of these supplies must be secretly transferred to designated locations. Personnel observation. Pay attention to any members in the Butterfly Mansion who have minor injuries, recover quickly, or show strong loyalty to Kocho Shinobu herself. Record their characteristics and potential assessments. The commands pierced Kocho Shinobu's core consciousness like cold steel needles. She was in the middle of treating a wound on her right shoulder when her movements abruptly froze, and the antiseptic cotton swab fell to the ground. Deep within her purple eyes, pain was instantly covered by a deeper, forcibly driven coldness. She had to obey, she couldn't resist. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to resume the detached and precise mask of the insect Hashira, and walked towards the cabinet where scrolls and material lists were stored. C. Jinkin opened his eyes, his crimson pupils glinting in the darkness. The advantage of controlling a Hashira was immense. He was no longer satisfied with sporadic attacks and hiding. In the early Taisho era, this period of transition, cities were expanding, railways were extending, and people were moving. Chaos bred, providing fertile ground for shadows to spread. He stood up. Kocho Shinobu was the sharpest wedge he had driven into the Demon Slayer core, but she wasn't his only chess piece. Using the intelligence she provided, he could precisely avoid the Demon Slayer Corp's vanguard. Through the resources she mobilized, especially the wisteria poison that was supposed to be used against him, he secretly stockpiled or used it for research, in turn strengthening his own resistance and power. The marked, potential Demon Slayer Corps members were his future targets for conversion, or infiltration. He walked out of the stronghold, blending into the night on the outskirts of Tokyo Prefecture, where the smell of coal smoke and sweat mingled. The area was densely populated, order was chaotic, and low-wage workers toiled day and night for meager pay. A few disappearances wouldn't cause much of a stir. C. Jinkin's gaze swept over the weary figures. The Demon Slayer Corp's reach was relatively weak here. He selected an abandoned warehouse as his new temporary stronghold. Over the next few weeks, C. Jinkin's sphere of activity quietly expanded. Using the Demon Slayer Corps patrol routes provided by Kocho Shinobu, he directed the scattered, still low-level demon servants he had converted, to conduct selective hunts in the Demon Slayer Corps' blind spots. The goal was no longer aimless slaughter, but to select workers who were physically strong, relatively weak-willed, or in desperate situations and easily tempted by power. Convert them, control them. He needed a more covert force, one more obedient to him. At the same time, supplies secretly transported through Kocho Shinobu's channels, including precious medicinal herbs and refined steel, were stockpiled deep within the warehouse. C. Jinkin began to attempt to modify his own body, using steel to reinforce his bones and medicinal herbs to neutralize the effects of wisteria poison. Each experiment was accompanied by intense pain, but each success increased his power and boosted his resistance to poison. He was arming himself with the enemy's resources. Every piece of intelligence Kocho Shinobu relayed, every material request she made, felt like a knife scraping at her own soul. She watched as precious wisteria poison was transported away, as intelligence meant to protect fellow members fell into demon hands, as C. Jenkins' influence, like rotting roots, quietly grew and spread in the shadows of the butterfly mansion she cherished and the cities the demon slayer corps protected. She remained the calm insect Hashira, tending to the injured and assigning missions, but only she knew that every command she issued could become nourishment for that monster. Her clear-headedness became the cruelest torture. C. Jenkins stood by the broken window on the top floor of the warehouse, gazing at the distant city skyline, dotted with lights. He could feel the number of demon servants under his control increasing, and his stronghold becoming more organized. Through Kocho Shinobu, he had even opened an invisible crack in the heavily guarded fortress of the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters. This was just the beginning. The curtain of the Taisho era had just risen, and he had enough time and patience to weave a larger, more deadly web across this land where old and new intertwined. He needed more chess pieces, stronger power, and a wider shadow. The project steadily progressed in the shadows, and C. Jenkins' nightly activities became regular hunts. He roamed like a ghost through the city's outskirts and slums, searching for lone demons that could make him stronger. Ordinary demon servants could no longer satisfy his craving for power. One night, a strong smell of blood, like rust, pierced his nostrils, coming from a dilapidated house deep within a dark alley. C. Jenkins pushed open the door, and the scene inside was horrific, with bodies scattered everywhere. In the center of the room, a figure was greedily devouring the blood of the last corpse. The demon looked up, its eyes clearly marked with, lower rank 4. Ho! Look who it is, a stray kitten. C. Jenkins leaned against the doorframe, his tone as flippant as if he were greeting someone at a market. Lower rank 4. Tisk, the numbers auspicious, but the strength, weak. He mimicked a tone from deep within his memory. Lower rank 4 spun around abruptly, his blood-red eyes filled with savagery, but then a hint of confusion flashed through them. He smelled a fellow demon, yet something was different, the aura was more dangerous. Get out. This is my territory and my prey. He growled, trying to drive away the unwelcome guest with his aura. Your territory. Your prey. C. Jenkins sneered, his crimson pupils glowing in the darkness. Jojo, I'm not doing ordinary demons anymore. Dio. He suddenly took a step forward, his figure instantly blurring. Aura. The battle ended faster than expected. Lower rank 4's blood demon art couldn't even fully manifest before it was torn to shreds by C. Jenkins' violent and precise attacks. C. Jenkins stepped on the opponent's broken body, looking at the face contorted in fear and disbelief. Tisk, a lower rank. Is that all? C. Jenkins tilted his head, his crimson eyes devoid of emotion, as if contemplating whether to pack up dinner leftovers. Implant a flesh bud. Control a lower rank. He pouted. Too weak to waste a precious seed on. Besides, these lower ranks, each one was so uninteresting, not even worthy of being a toy. Forget it, I'll just replenish my nutrition directly. He leaned down, his sharp fangs piercing lower rank 4's neck. Powerful strength, along with fragmented memories, surged into his body. Although jumbled, it did solidify his core a bit more. Just as he finished devouring and was about to leave the mess, a cold, supreme will suddenly pierced his mind. It was as if all the malice in the world was concentrated there. You are very interesting. A deep, elegant, yet undeniably arrogant voice resonated directly in his consciousness. It was Kibutsuji Muzan. Devouring a lower rank. Good nerve. This power deserves a better home. Join me, become my true arm, and you will receive blessings far beyond your imagination. C. Jenkins' movements froze. He licked the lingering blood from the corner of his mouth, and instead of fear, a silent, wild laugh erupted in his consciousness. Ha! Join you. Become a dog for a coward who hides in the gutter all day and doesn't even dare to face the sun. C. Jenkins' consciousness retorted directly, full of mockery and undisguised sarcasm. Your blessings. Do you mean the curse that could take your life at any moment? Or your pathetic attempts to split your cells, terrified of being found? Oh, right, I heard you were chased all over the world by a brat with a Nichiren blade. How lame. Muzan's cold, Arrogant voice instantly solidified, as if struck by an invisible sledgehammer. Si Jinkin had precisely hit his deepest fears, his most painful scars, the fear of sunlight, the ultimate dread of death, the bone-deep shadow of Yorichi Sugikuni, and the humiliation of being forced to split his cells and flee. Insolent. Muzin's will erupted in a towering rage, the elegance was gone, leaving only pure savagery and killing intent after being exposed. Vile creature. I will have you die. Die now. The Muzin's blood in Si Jinkin's body instantly boiled, and a terrifying curse was activated, attempting to tear him apart and dissolve him from within. Intense pain swept through his entire body, and Si Jinkin grunted, dropping to one knee. However, the anticipated explosion and death did not occur. The power of the curse, which was enough to instantly kill any demon, violently surged within Si Jinkin's body for a few seconds, then seemed to hit an invisible barrier, rapidly decaying and dissipating. Si Jinkin's energy core fluctuated wildly, but eventually stabilized. Impossible. For the first time, a clear, immense wave of shock appeared in Muzin's consciousness. He couldn't understand why his absolute control and destructive curse, embedded in the blood of all demons, had no effect on this fellow. Weak. Muzin. Is your curse only this strong? It's not even enough to tickle me. After the intense pain subsided slightly, Si Jinkin let out an even more rampant laugh in his consciousness. A dead silence was his response. The cold will retreated rapidly like a tide, severing its connection with Si Jinkin's blood. It cut off cleanly and completely, as if it had never appeared, leaving only Si Jinkin in place, and the increasingly mad, playful curve of his lips. Hey, got triggered and pulled the plug directly. Truly, a sore loser. Si Jinkin stood up, brushed the dust from his clothes, and his crimson eyes gazed into the boundless night, with an excited glint dancing within them. Things just got more interesting. Si Jinkin traversed the chaotic alleys of the industrial district, where the stench of coal smoke and garbage mingled with the night's dampness. The brief, intense clash of consciousness with Muzin earlier left the energy core within him still faintly humming. He needed to return to his base as quickly as possible, digest the power gained from devouring lower rank 4, and re-evaluate Muzin's threat rank. Just as he rounded a corner piled high with discarded wooden crates, the moonlight briefly pierced through the clouds, illuminating an inconspicuous pile of junk deep within the alley. An object, covered in oil and dust, reflected a faint glint, its shape unusually familiar. A stone mask etched with bizarre patterns, its edges still stained with dried blood. The stone mask. Si Jinkin's steps instantly halted, his crimson pupils abruptly constricting. This thing shouldn't be here. Not in this era, in this world. He quickly stepped forward, his cold fingers wiping away the grime from the mosque's surface, confirming the unique and ancient patterns without a doubt. A chilling sense of alarm crept up his spine. He clutched the mask in his hand, its touch was cold and heavy. The appearance of this item was no accident. Could it be, there were other, vampires, like him? Or perhaps, someone else had mastered the technology to create vampires, or even, a transmigration. This thought made the air around him seem to solidify for a moment. He immediately scanned his surroundings, his perception spreading out like an invisible spider web, catching any abnormal aura or movement nearby. Besides a few startled rats and the distant ramblings of a drunkard, he found nothing. The mask had clearly been abandoned here for quite some time. Suppressing the surprise and suspicion in his heart, Si Jinkin tucked the stone mask into his embrace, quickening his pace, merging faster into the night, and rushing towards his abandoned warehouse base. Back at the base, the newly converted low-level demon servants, sensing the lingering malevolence emanating from him, cowered in the corners. Si Jinkin ignored them, walking directly to his designated work area, deep within the warehouse. He placed the stone mask next to a pile of refined steel and medicinal herbs, examining it carefully under the dim oil lamp. The mask lay there silently, its patterns appearing even more mysterious in the light and shadow. It was like a stone dropped into still water, creating unknown ripples in what he had once thought was a clear game board. This isn't the work of the Demon Slayer Corps. Si Jinkin murmured to himself, his fingertips tracing the mosque's cold edge. Muzin and Kocho Shinobu's reactions also indicate they've never seen this thing. Muzin's astonishment and fury were genuine, he was shocked by his special ability to resist the curse, but that shock contained no recognition of a kindred spirit. Kocho Shinobu's intelligence and conveyed pain had never involved vampires, or the existence of anything similar to the stone mask. From this, he deduced, in this world, vampires originating from the stone mask, like him, were either extremely rare, or, he was a singular case. The appearance of this mask was either an extremely accidental temporal displacement, or the work of an extremely secretive force that even the Demon Slayer Corps in Muzan had not detected. Whichever it was, it signified potential, uncontrollable variables. C. Jenkins' gaze sharpened. Unknown as threat. He needed intelligence, about this mask, about any possible clues related to it. He immediately issued new, cold instructions to Kocho Shinobu through the fleshy bud deeply embedded in her glabella. Use all your authority and intelligence network to secretly investigate a special ancient stone mask. Characteristics. Etched with unknown spiral and pointed patterns, material is neither metal nor jade, edges may have residual bloodstains. Focus on black market antique dealers, grave robbers, and any underground channels involving anomalous items or occultism. Search for all records of its appearance or legends. This matter is of the highest priority and must not be leaked to anyone in the Demon Slayer Corps. Codename. Non-Demon Slayer Corps target. The instructions were clear and direct, leaving no room for doubt. At the same time, he issued similar orders to his demon servant network, instructing them to use their low-level identities to keep an eye out for similar items or related rumors in darker corners. He needed to weave a finer net, not only to capture the movements of the Demon Slayer Corps but also to capture any possible traces of vampires. The appearance of the stone mask was like a silent alarm bell, making him realize that beneath the shadows he thought he was gradually controlling, there might be deeper darkness lurking, a darkness that even Muzan had never set foot in. He had to figure it out. This also made him feel how foolish he was at the time, only indulging in his frenzy, completely failing to react to why the stone mask was in this place. Idiot. C. Jenkins slammed his fist against a nearby iron rack, emitting a screeching metallic crunch that made the low-level demon servants in the corner cower. He was scolding himself. He had been so preoccupied with provoking Muzan, devouring the lower ranks, and reveling in the thrill of increasing power, that he almost missed something as important as the stone mask. This oversight was unforgivable. Regret was instantly replaced by cold action. He immediately issued even stricter instructions to Kocho Shinobu through the fleshy bud in his glabella. Highest priority change. The directive to find the mask remains, increase intensity and scope. Utilize all clandestine funds, if necessary, divert and sell Demon Slayer Corps supplies. Black markets, antique dealers, grave robbers, occultists, deeply investigate all relevant channels. At the same time, raise funds for me, large amounts of funds. I need travel expenses for a long journey, destination, Egypt. He believed that since the stone mask could appear here, then the arrow, containing even more terrifying power was also very likely to exist in some corner of this world, most probably in Egypt. He had to find it. The instructions were also transmitted to all the demon servant networks under his control. Find the stone mask, highest priority. At the same time, in your hunting and activities, selectively plunder wealth, jewelry, cash, valuable items. Target the rich districts, banks, and transport lines. Avoid the Demon Slayer Corps, actions must be clean. All acquired wealth is to be concentrated at the warehouse base. He needed money, a lot of money, to fund his journey to Egypt. After issuing the commands, C. Jenkins felt a brief surge of impatience. Raising money and searching would take time, and the power from devouring the lower ranks was mostly digested within him, leaving him temporarily with nothing to do. He hated waiting. Go out for a walk. He told himself. Staying in the warehouse, staring at that cold mask, was useless. He needed to breathe the outside air, even if it was air mixed with coal smoke and the smell of decay. More importantly, he recalled the peculiar gravity of the JoJo world, the pull of destiny. Perhaps, when he actively stepped into this chaos of night, destiny would lead him to new discoveries. He needed to try his luck. He put on one of his special masks and once again merged into the darkness on the outskirts of Tokyo Prefecture. This time, his steps were aimless, he no longer deliberately avoided crowded areas, nor did he focus on hunting. His perception, like invisible tendrils, lingered in the chaotic streets, bustling gambling dens, and outside cheap taverns, catching any abnormal aura, words, or fluctuations of objects in the air. He was like a patient hunter, fishing in the river of destiny, waiting for a possible fish of accident to bite. He needed to see what else destiny would bring before him, beyond the shadow that belonged to him. C. Jinkin ambled through the bustling, diverse streets of Tokyo Prefecture. The air was a mix of cheap tobacco, sweat, and stale food. The clamor of gambling dens, the whispers of streetwalkers, and the grunts of drunks created a cacophony. He walked through it as if on a stroll, his senses extending like antennae, filtering out the noise, searching for unusual energy or object fluctuations. He turned into a narrow, reeking alley filled with garbage. Just as he was about to leave, his peripheral vision caught an inconspicuous lump of mud by a puddle of sewage. He squatted down, scraped off the mud, revealing a small, cold, spiral-patterned metal fragment. It wasn't a stone mask, but the material and pattern style were eerily familiar, carrying a sense of belonging to another era. He held the fragment, a flicker of interest in his crimson pupils. Tucking the fragment into his pocket, he continued his leisurely walk. He arrived at a slightly wider intersection, where people jostled shoulder to shoulder. Just then, a faint but distinct scent of a demon wafted into his nose. He glanced up, immediately locking onto his target, a scrawny man in tattered work clothes, head down, hurrying through the crowd. Ordinary, too ordinary, not even a proper demon, just a newly transformed, lowest-tier minion barely able to blend into the crowd. TCH. C. Jinkin scoffed inwardly. Such a specimen wasn't even enough to pick his teeth with. His current power core had no interest in such inferior nutrition. The demon apparently also sensed the bottomless, abyssal aura of terror emanating from C. Jinkin, its body stiffening instantly. Fear made it instinctively want to flee, but it dared not make any sudden movements in the crowd that might cause a commotion. C. Jinkin watched its trembling yet feigned composure, and the oblivious, jostling ordinary people around, a surge of violent irritation welling up inside him. Weak. Weak. He roared silently. If I weren't worried about attracting the flies of the Demon Slayer Corps, or if there truly were vampires, like me observing nearby, I'd really like to just aura, and clear out all these annoying bugs in my sight. Just as he was suppressing his killing intent, pondering whether to ignore this ant or casually crush it in a deserted corner, he suddenly felt a sharp gaze fall upon him. The gaze carried scrutiny and vigilance. A warning bell instantly rang in C. Jinkin's mind. Was it a Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps? He spun his head sharply, his crimson eyes precisely piercing towards the source of the gaze, in the shadows under the eaves of a closed wagashi shop across the street. When he saw the figure in the shadows, C. Jinkin's taut nerves instantly relaxed, and a playful curve even appeared at the corner of his mouth. He relaxed and no longer hesitated. He no longer looked at the demon blended into the crowd, instead striding forward, ignoring the dense flow of people, forcing his way through as if parting water. The low-level demon felt the approaching shadow of death and could no longer control its fear, letting out a strange cry and lunging towards an old man pushing a cart nearby. Mongrel. Who allowed you to move? The world. C. Jinkin shouted, his figure blurring only slightly in the eyes of ordinary people. The next second, he had already appeared behind the demon, one hand gripping its nape like an iron vise, the other hand inserting into its back heart with lightning speed. PFF'd. A faint sound, masked by the noise. The demon couldn't even let out a scream, its body rapidly shriveling and carbonizing like a punctured balloon, turning into dust and dissipating under the feet of the crowded people. The entire process was astonishingly fast. The surrounding people only felt a gust of wind, as if someone had pushed past, and no one even noticed that the scrawny man in work clothes had vanished into thin air. C. Jinkin slowly released his hand, letting the insignificant dust be trampled and crushed by countless hurried souls, merging into the grime of the ground. His crimson pupils showed no ripple, as if he had merely brushed away a speck of dust. However, all of his highly concentrated attention was now locked like an invisible probe onto the shadow under the eaves across the street. That figure. The deep blue houri almost merged with the shadow in the dim light. It was Tamayo. At the exact moment C. Jinkin crushed the low-level demon and its body dissipated into dust, an extremely subtle, colorless, and odorless exotic fragrance, like an invisible ripple, silently spread out from Tamayo. This fragrance cleverly blended into the inherent smells of cheap tobacco, sweat, and stale food in the alley, like a drop of water entering the ocean, without alerting anyone. Tamayo's blood demon art, visual dream fragrance, had already activated. This was not a powerful attack or hallucination, but an extremely precise cognitive interference. Its target was not C. Jinkin, but all the ordinary people on this street who had just witnessed that scene. The old man pushing the cart, who had almost been lunged at by the low-level demon, had the momentary terror on his face erased as if by an eraser, his eyes showing a fleeting blankness, then quickly returning to his hurried urgency, as if he had only been jostled by the crowded flow of people. A few passers-by nearby who might have glimpsed the moment the scrawny man in work clothes disappeared only paused imperceptibly, their gaze subconsciously sweeping over the suddenly empty spot, but their brains automatically, rationally, explained it as, that person pushed through and left, or, was no one standing there just now, and then they continued their journey without a care. No one cried out, no one searched, no one questioned the disappearance of a living person into thin air. The clamor and noise of the entire street continued, the flow of people surged unabated, and the instant annihilation that had just occurred, along with the traces of the scrawny man in work clothes' existence, was thus silently erased and overridden by Tamayo from everyone's short-term memory and present perception. Everything on the street quickly returned to normal, as if the demon had never existed, and had never disappeared. Hey! You! A voice, suppressing anger and disbelief, rang out. C. Jinkin shook his hand, as if merely dusting off something, and slowly turned around. He saw Zushi had rushed over from the shadows across the street, grabbing his arm and forcefully pulling him into a more secluded alley nearby. She abruptly pushed C. Jinkin against the wall, her almond eyes wide, filled with a mix of intense shock and lingering fear. Are you crazy? C. Jinkin. In that kind of place. In front of so many people. You just killed it. Zushi's chest heaved violently, clearly very angry. Do you know how dangerous that was? What if someone saw it? What if it caused a commotion? She took a breath, her voice filled with more incredulous shock than anger. And, how did you do that? That movement. I didn't even see it clearly. You didn't even use a sword. Just like that, a demon, even a low-level one, just, gone. Zushi looked at C. Jinkin's nonchalant, almost, is that all? Expression, feeling her understanding of reality severely challenged. This power completely exceeded her imagination of demons, or humans. C. Jinkin let her hold him, tilting his head, his crimson eyes looking playfully at Zushi's face, flushed with shock and excitement. Oh. Are you teaching me how to do things? Young Miss Zushi. He mimicked a frivolous tone, I was just cleaning up trash. As for how I did it, perhaps it's because I'm stronger. Probably. Dio da. That last exclamation was C. Jinkin speaking on impulse, but it also startled Zushi. Zushi stared at C. Jinkin as if he were insane, completely unable to comprehend his baffling words. She sighed heavily, not releasing her grip on his arm. Instead, she pulled him harder, turning to drag him deeper into the alley. Come with me. Zushi's voice was very low, brooking no argument, still tinged with anger. C. Jinkin raised an eyebrow, offering no resistance, allowing her to pull him. His crimson eyes scanned Zushi's taut profile and her knuckles, white from exertion. He remained silent, like an object, being pulled by Zushi, quickly navigating the labyrinthine, filthy, narrow alleys on the outskirts of Tokyo Prefecture. Footsteps echoed particularly clearly in the dead air. Zushi's hurried, C. Jinkin's lagging, making sticky sounds as they trod on sewage and garbage. Zushi was extremely familiar with the route, winding through twists and turns, avoiding all possible lines of sight. C. Jinkin, like a puppet on strings, his crimson eyes aimlessly scanning the dilapidated walls and scurrying rats, the faint curve of a smile always lingering at his lips. There was no conversation along the way, only the persistent smell of decay and coal smoke. Finally, Zushi stopped before a row of ruins, almost completely collapsed and barely concealed by various discarded items and broken wooden planks. She cautiously looked around, confirming no one was following, then painstakingly moved aside a disguised, heavy wooden plank, revealing a low, narrow entrance behind it. A strong scent of disinfectant mixed with herbs wafted out. Come in. Zushi bent down and entered first. Si Jinkin followed, bending to pass through the entrance. The interior was starkly different from the ruins outside, a relatively spacious, exceptionally clean area. The whitewashed walls were somewhat mottled, and tall medicine cabinets lined the walls, filled with glass bottles and jars containing various liquids. In the center was an operating table covered with a white cloth. The strong medicinal smell attempted to mask a faint, lingering demonic stench. This was a hidden underground clinic. As Si Jinkin straightened up, a figure, like a beast enraged by an intrusion into its territory, suddenly lunged from the shadows in a corner, radiating intense hostility and vigilance, blocking Tamayo's path completely, his gaze piercing Si Jinkin like daggers. It was Yushiro. He wore a faded, old-school uniform, his hair meticulously neat, his handsome face now contorted by extreme disgust and wariness, but when he turned to Tamayo, that distortion instantly transformed into immense respect and concern. Lady Tamayo. Yushiro's voice was urgent and bewildered. He quickly bowed to Tamayo, then refocused his hostile gaze on Si Jinkin. You're finally back. Please, you must keep your distance from this man. The chi emanating from him. He sniffed hard, his brows tightly furrowed, as if he had detected a deadly poison. It's mixed with a strong smell of blood, a nauseating curse, and a kind of rotten sweetness. It's even more unsettling than Muzin's chi. This place is your holy land for researching how to fight Muzin. How can such a filthy existence be allowed to step in? Please, order me immediately to drive him out. His finger, pointing at Si Jinkin, trembled slightly with agitation, but his tone overflowed with respect and concern for Tamayo. Tamayo released Si Jinkin's hand, her brow slightly furrowed. Yushiro, calm down. This. Lady Tamayo. Yushiro interrupted urgently, his attention entirely on Si Jinkin. His loyalty to Tamayo made him utterly reject any potential threat. You are too kind. Look at him. Wearing that bizarre mask, his chi is so evil and chaotic. He is not worthy of your trust at all. Who knows if he isn't a new trap sent by Muzin. Please, you must be careful. Let me handle him. He stepped forward again, blocking more thoroughly, and sternly rebuked Si Jinkin. Listen, you filthy thing of unknown origin. I don't care who sent you, now get out immediately. Stay away from Lady Tamayo. You are not welcome here. An existence like you will only defile Lady Tamayo's research in this holy land. Get out. His words were sharp and venomous, filled with extreme rejection and contempt for Si Jinkin's existence. Every filthy thing and filthy existence was like a poisoned needle, pricking Si Jinkin. Si Jinkin remained motionless, his crimson pupils gazing calmly at Yushiro through the mosque's eyeholes. There was no anger in that gaze, only an indifference like one observing an ant. It wasn't until Yushiro's contemptuous, filthy thing, blurted out, accompanied by spittle almost spraying onto the mask, that Si Jinkin's eyes suddenly turned cold. Without warning. Bang! A dull, teeth-grinding thud exploded in the confined space. Si Jinkin's fist, so fast it left only a blurry afterimage, landed squarely in the center of Yushiro's abdomen. Ah! PFF'd. Yushiro's curses and reprimands ceased abruptly, his eyeballs instantly bulging from the intense pain, and the acid from his stomach mixed with bile uncontrollably spewed violently from his wide-open mouth. His entire body arched sharply as if struck by a giant hammer, his feet instantly leaving the ground, sent flying backward by that terrifying, irresistible force. Boom! Crash! Clang! Yushiro's body, like a cannonball, slammed heavily into a tall medicine cabinet filled with glass bottles and jars behind him. The heavy wooden cabinet let out a groan of protest, shaking violently. Immediately following, the dense sound of shattering glass erupted like hailstones, wildly. Multicolored medicinal liquids, powders, and glass shards scattered like an explosion, and a pungent mixed scent instantly permeated the entire space. Yushiro fell heavily like a discarded bag of trash into the mixture of glass shards and viscous medicinal liquid on the floor, his body writhing and convulsing violently from extreme pain, guttural choking sounds of, ho-ho, escaping his throat, unable to even let out a complete scream. Si Jinkin slowly retracted his fist, casually shaking his wrist, as if he had just swatted away a buzzing fly. He took 2 steps forward, his gleaming leather shoes making a teeth-grinding, crunch-crunch, sound on the floor mixed with medicinal liquid and broken glass. He looked down at Yushiro, who was curled up in filth and in excruciating pain, his crimson pupils showing no ripple, only a cold indifference. Noisy insect. C. Jenkins spoke, his voice as flat as if stating an objective fact. Weak. Easily crushed. You dare, Yushiro struggled, trying to lift his head, his face covered in viscous medicinal liquid, vomit, and dust, looking utterly wretched. But the hatred burning in his eyes was not pure, it was a deeper humiliation and a sense of powerlessness from being utterly trampled, especially in front of Lady Tamayo, whom he revered as a goddess. However, his instinctive concern for Tamayo's safety overshadowed everything. He struggled, trying to prop himself up with his still movable arm, and hoarsely growled, "Lady Tamayo, quick, quick, get away from him, dangerous." Just then, Tamayo moved. The instant C. Jinkin took another step, seemingly intending to completely eliminate this noisy insect, Tamayo suddenly rushed forward, spreading her arms, unhesitatingly blocking Yushiro. Her movements were quick and resolute, her face showing unprecedented urgency and pleading. "Stop. Sir. Please stop." Tamayo's voice trembled slightly with urgency. She looked up directly at C. Jinkin's cold mask and crimson pupils. "Yushiro, he was merely overly worried about my safety." His words were offensive, truly rude. But this was absolutely not his intention. "Please, for my sake, spare him this once." Tamayo's gaze quickly swept over the wretched Yushiro on the floor, who was still trying to protect her, a flicker of heartache in her eyes, her tone becoming even more earnest. "He is very important to me. He is my indispensable assistant." Although his words just now were venomous, his sole motivation was to protect me. Please be lenient. I promise, there will never be a next time. I will restrain him." She bowed slightly, her posture very humble. "Mr. C. Jinkin, I will use all my resources to investigate the information you need. Please, let him go." Her words were clear and urgent, every syllable filled with the eagerness and determination to plead for Yushiro, while also highlighting Yushiro's value to her and the price she was willing to pay. C. Jinkin's footsteps stopped. His crimson pupils shifted slightly, his gaze moving from Yushiro, twitching like a dying fish on the floor, to Tamayo's face, which blocked his path, her posture humble but her eyes firm. That gaze was full of scrutiny, as if weighing which was heavier, the life of this noisy insect or the value she could provide. The air seemed to freeze, leaving only Yushiro's painful gasps and the faint sound of dripping medicinal liquid. After a few seconds of suffocating silence, C. Jinkin let out an ambiguous snort from his nostrils. HMPH. He slowly retracted his advanced foot, the cold killing intent receding like a tide. He no longer looked at Yushiro on the floor, as if the other party had become a mass of air not worth bothering with. His gaze refocused on Tamayo, with a condescending air of charity. "Remember your words, woman." C. Jinkin's voice reverted to that metallic, abrasive quality, cold and emotionless, information. Top priority. As for this, he didn't even bother to mention his name, merely tilting his chin ever so slightly in Yushiro's direction, keep his mouth in check. Next time, there will be no, for someone's sake, involved. Having said that, he ignored the two of them and walked directly to the only relatively clean chair in the clinic, sitting down casually, as if the previous conflict had never happened. He crossed his legs, his crimson eyes gleaming faintly in the dim light, like a master waiting for his servant to report on work. Tamayo's tense body finally relaxed, and she let out a long, silent sigh of relief. She immediately knelt down, carefully avoiding Yushiro's injuries, and began to examine his wounds, her eyes filled with worry and guilt. And Yushiro on the floor, under the impact of intense pain and humiliation, watched Lady Tamayo humbly plead for him with that monster, and a strong self-reproach and deeper resentment coiled around his heart like a poisonous vine, but he bit his lip tightly, not daring to make any sound that might provoke the monster again. Tamayo's fingers, trembling slightly, pressed quickly and professionally on Yushiro's abdomen. She could feel that his internal organs had suffered a violent shock from that terrifying blow, and there might even be slight ruptures and bleeding. Fortunately, his bones did not seem to have comminuted fractures, but the soft tissue damage was severe, and internal bleeding was inevitable. Yushiro's body convulsed violently under her hands, and cold sweat instantly soaked his faded old student uniform. He bit his lower lip tightly, forcing back the groan of pain that almost escaped him, only letting out a muffled whimper in his throat. Sweat beads as large as beans, mixed with medicine and grime on his face, rolled down. He struggled to lift his head to look at Tamayo, his eyes filled with pain, humiliation, and a deep-seated hatred for Si Jinkin, but even more so, a desperate sense of powerlessness. Tamayo quickly glanced at Si Jinkin, who was sitting on a chair, casually crossing his legs as if he were in his own home. His crimson pupils were hidden behind his mask, showing no emotion, only quietly watching, as if enjoying a silent play. That cold, chaotic, and powerful chi pressed down on the small space as if it were substantial. She forced herself to calm down. The most important thing now was to treat Yushiro's injuries. She turned and deftly took disinfectant, clean bandages, and some emergency oral pills from another surviving medicine cabinet. She knelt beside Yushiro, ignoring the filth on the ground, and carefully unbuttoned his shirt, revealing his bruised and even slightly sunken abdomen. Bear with it, Yushiro. Tamayo's voice was very low, with an undeniable calmness. She dipped a sterile cotton swab in the medicine and gently wiped the wound. Yushiro's body tensed abruptly, his teeth grinding, but he stared fixedly at Tamayo, managing not to make a sound, though the veins on his forehead bulged. Tamayo's hands were steady as she quickly treated the external wounds, simultaneously putting pills into Yushiro's mouth and giving him a little water. After all this, she helped Yushiro lean against a relatively clean corner. Throughout the entire process, her nerves were taut, wary of the presence in the chair that could change his mind at any moment. And Si Jinkin remained motionless, only his crimson gaze like an invisible probe. Only after confirming that Yushiro was temporarily out of danger and only needed rest and recovery did Tamayo slowly stand up. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the complex emotions swirling in her chest: fear, anger, worry, and a strong apprehension of Si Jinkin's inhuman power, and a hint of irrepressible curiosity. She turned to Si Jinkin, her posture no longer as humble as before, but still maintaining necessary caution. Sir, Tamayo began, her voice a little weary but very clear, now, I think we can formally introduce ourselves. She bowed slightly, performing a formal courtesy. My name is Tamayo. I am a doctor who studies the weaknesses of demons, and my goal is to kill Kibutsuji Muzan. Si Jinkin's crimson pupils seemed to shift slightly, focusing on Tamayo's face. He didn't respond immediately, only the faint curve at the corner of his mouth seemed to deepen a little. Tamayo waited a few seconds, and seeing that the other party had no intention of speaking, she continued. You are clearly not an ordinary being. Your power is beyond my comprehension. Begging your pardon, you possess the chi of a demon, very powerful, very ancient. But it also seems, mixed with something else, a chaotic fluctuation I have never felt before. Her gaze sharpened, trying to penetrate the cold mask. What, exactly, are you? Hey! A low chuckle came from beneath the mask, with a metallic grinding texture, breaking the oppressive silence in the clinic. Si Jinkin finally moved, shifting to a more comfortable sitting position, his crossed legs swinging slightly. Name. He tilted his head, his crimson eyes sparkling with a teasing light. Si Jinkin. My name is Si Jinkin. As for what I am. He paused, as if pondering an interesting question, a passing common writer. A justice partner out of interest. Or. His voice suddenly rose, with a somewhat exaggerated operatic tone, an ultimate being pursuing supreme pleasure. This sudden strange cry made both Tamayo and Yushiro, who was struggling to breathe in the corner, tremble violently. Tamayo's expression instantly froze, her brows tightly furrowed, her eyes filled with bewilderment and deep suspicion of, is there something wrong with this person's head? Yushiro was so angry he almost spat out another mouthful of blood, glaring fiercely at Si Jinkin, as if wanting to burn him through with his gaze. Si Jinkin seemed very pleased with their reactions, letting out a series of incomprehensible low chuckles. Haha, just kidding, to lighten the mood. Don't mind it. He waved his hand, his flippant attitude completely different from his previous ruthless image of sending Yushiro flying. As you heard, my name is Si Jinkin. As for my identity, well, you can think of me as a rather special demon. Or, a demon who has risen above base interests. He spread his hands. Anyway, I'm not Muzin's lackey, you can rest assured about that. I scoff at his taste. Tamayo did not relax her guard, she caught the key information. A special demon. You are not controlled by Muzin. Controlled. C. Jenkins scoffed, a hint of disdain flashing in his crimson pupils. Such things cannot bind me. Just as water cannot trap a true fish, and the sun cannot stop me from sunbathing, of course, I mean moonbathing. He leaned forward slightly, his mask close to Tamayo. Even across the distance, the powerful oppressive feeling washed over her. Woman, you've asked me so much, now it's my turn, isn't it? His crimson eyes stared directly at Tamayo. Young Miss Tamayo, do you wish to kill Kibutsuji Muzin? His voice was flat, but the question itself was like a boulder thrown into still water, stirring up silent, enormous waves in the small clinic. Tamayo's body instantly stiffened. That name, Kibutsuji Muzin, struck her like a cold bolt of lightning. Bone-deep fear, ingrained hatred, centuries of despair like a shadow, countless intense emotions churned and clashed in her eyes, almost overflowing. Her fingers unconsciously clenched the hem of her clothes, her knuckles white from the effort. She opened her mouth, but her throat felt as if something was blocked, unable to make any sound. In the corner, Yushiro also struggled to lift his head, looking at Tamayo, his eyes filled with the same pain and worry. A few seconds of silence, as long as a century. Finally, Tamayo took a deep, deliberate breath, as if using all her strength. She raised her eyes, looking directly into C. Jenkins' crimson, cold, seemingly all-knowing gaze. All fear and hesitation were forcibly suppressed at this moment, leaving only a centuries-old, almost obsessive resolve. Yes. Her voice was not loud, but exceptionally clear, with a decisive hardness, like quenched steel. My only purpose in existence is to kill Kibutsuji Muzin. At any cost. At any cost. C. Jinkin repeated in a low voice, something flashing in his crimson pupils, as if he had found an interesting toy. Very good. A very resolute answer. I like people with goals. He leaned back in the chair, his posture returning to its previous languidness. Well, let's talk about me. As for me, currently, I have no particular goal. He shrugged, his tone as casual as if discussing the weather. Just wandering around, looking at this decaying yet beautiful world, finding some fun. And, by the way, cleaning up the annoying trash along the way, like that blind bug just now. He glanced at Yushiro in the corner, who immediately flinched as if pricked by a needle. However, C. Jenkins' tone shifted, his voice taking on a strange rhythm, like a mysterious chant. Young Miss Tamayo, do you believe in gravity? Gravity. Tamayo frowned again, completely unable to follow his leaping thoughts. Yes, gravity. C. Jenkins continued on his own, his voice becoming deep and magnetic, with a power to bewitch people's hearts. All things in the world operate under the influence of gravity. The trajectories of stars, the tides of the ocean, the return of fallen leaves to their roots, even the encounters, separations, struggles, and gatherings of people and demons, everything that seems accidental is actually already guided by an invisible gravity, heading towards an inevitable outcome. He raised his hand, fingers spread, towards the dim light, as if capturing the invisible lines of power. Just like now, you and I meet in this filthy underground clinic. You, bearing a deep hatred for Muzin, I, coincidentally possessing the power to crush him. Isn't this the guidance of gravity? His crimson eyes turned to Tamayo, sparkling with an eerie light. This is the arrangement of Stein's gate. It's the clash of golden spirit and jet black will. It's, well, anyway, it's very wonderful, isn't it? Tamayo was utterly confused, feeling that this being who called himself C. Jinkin was terrifyingly powerful, yet his mind was as chaotic as if he had a split personality, spouting strange words she couldn't understand. She could only barely grasp the core. You mean, our meeting is destined. You are willing to help me kill Muzin. Help you. C. Jinkin lowered his hand, letting out an incomprehensible snort. Not entirely. I just think that watching an old monster who has lived for over 1,000 years be crushed would be a very enjoyable thing. He let out another strange cry, then his tone returned to normal. And, cleaning up this environmentally polluting trash, making the air a little fresher, can also be considered my humble contribution. After all, I am a justice partner out of interest. He paused, his crimson pupils through the mask locking onto Tamayo. So, young Miss Tamayo, do you want to team up with me? Although the teammate seems a bit weak, intelligence work is indispensable. You need my power to crush Muzan, and I. He spread his hands. Need a support, who can provide intelligence and logistics. Each gets what they need, a fair trade, isn't it? Jojo, no, Tamayo. Tamayo's heart pounded violently. This proposal was too sudden, too crazy, and too dangerous. This being who called himself C. Jinkin was unfathomably powerful, yet like a huge enigma, full of the unknown and uncontrollable. His power was alluring, but his chaos and madness were equally deadly. He was like a double-edged sword. If not used properly, it could very likely harm oneself first. Moreover, his strange words and unpredictable behavior made her deeply uneasy. However, kill Muzan. This goal, like a flame that had burned for centuries, had never extinguished. She had struggled alone for too long, the disparity in power was despair-inducing. This person before her was the only being who had shown power capable of threatening Muzan. Although he was like a storm carrying destruction, this might be her only chance, and possibly her last chance. She recalled C. Jinkin's casual annihilation of a demon just now, and his terrifying strength in sending Yushiro flying with a single punch. That kind of power, if used against Muzan. Tamayo's gaze swept over the heavily injured Yushiro, seeing the strong opposition and worry in his eyes. She knew what Yushiro was thinking. But she also saw the absolute loyalty in Yushiro's eyes for her safety, a loyalty that, in the face of absolute power, was fragile and vulnerable. She could not lose Yushiro. She looked at C. Jinkin again. Those crimson pupils, cold, indifferent, yet with a hint of scrutiny, seemed to be waiting for her answer, and also evaluating the value of an item. Time passed by minute, only Yushiro's suppressed gasps and the soft sound of medicine dripping remained in the clinic. Finally, Tamayo slowly, and extremely solemnly, nodded. Her voice was still a little hoarse, but every word was crystal clear. I agree. She looked directly into those crimson eyes. Mr. C. Jinkin. I, Tamayo, am willing to cooperate with you. I will do everything in my power to provide you with all intelligence about Muzan and demons, and any research support you need. My goal is only one, and that is to kill Kibutsuji Muzan. She paused slightly, her tone becoming extremely serious. But I also need your promise. First, please restrain your power and do not harm humans without cause. Second, she glanced at Yushiro. Please, do not harm Yushiro again. He is very important to me. C. Jinkin listened quietly. When Tamayo finished speaking, his crimson pupils narrowed slightly, as if weighing the import of her words. A few seconds later, he let out a soft snort from his nasal cavity. HMPH. All right. He stood up, his tall figure casting deeper shadows in the small space. I'm not interested in crushing irrelevant bugs, as long as they don't buzz in my ear. He glanced at Yushiro, an expression that made the latter feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. As for this noisy one, for your face, as long as he controls his mouth and claws, I can pretend he doesn't exist. He paced in front of Tamayo, looking down at her, his crimson pupils showing no emotion. Then, the contract is established. Young Miss Tamayo, from now on, you are my logistics chief. Find the information I need as soon as possible. Remember. He leaned forward slightly, his cold breath brushing Tamayo's cheek. Time is very precious. Don't make me wait too long. Otherwise, I might go find some other fun, like challenging that so-called strongest Hashira. To see if he's really that invincible. The world. Time. Stop. Ha 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 ha. Another sudden burst of wild laughter and incomprehensible declarations. Tamayo suppressed the urge to retreat, feeling her temples throb. She began to wonder whether cooperating with this powerful yet utterly chaotic being was a shortcut to hope, or if it had opened Pandora's box, unleashing an even more terrifying disaster. But, the arrow had left the bowstring, there was no turning back. I understand, Mr. C. Jinkin. Tamayo suppressed the turmoil in her heart, trying to maintain a calm exterior. I will immediately start organizing the intelligence. Please, rest for a while. She turned and walked to the medicine cabinet, beginning to rummage through scrolls and notes recording demon activity, her movements swift and professional. Regardless, to kill Muzan, she had to grasp this flickering flame of hope in the darkness, even if it burned so strangely, so dangerously. And Si Jinkin, meanwhile, sat back down in the chair, his crimson eyes like a beast lurking in the shadows, quietly watching the busy Tamayo, the faint curve at the corner of his mouth seeming to foreshadow the coming storm. Tamayo's fingers paused for a moment on a yellowed scroll, then quickly and precisely pulled out several pages filled with delicate handwriting and complex symbols. Her movements were fluid, as if the intelligence, which documented countless sacrifices and pursuits, had long been etched into her bones. She turned and handed these heavy papers to the figure sitting silently in the shadows. Mr. Si Jinkin. Her voice was steady, carrying the calm typical of a doctor, but the fingertips that offered the papers trembled almost imperceptibly. These are Muzan's most probable stronghold locations, inferred from various clues over the past 50 years, as well as reports on the activity patterns of his direct subordinates, the upper-rank demons. While absolute precision cannot be guaranteed, this is the most reliable information we currently possess. Si Jinkin's scarlet eyes swept over the dense text and map markings, but he didn't reach out to take them. He tilted his head, his voice from beneath the mask carrying a hint of playfulness. Oh, not bad efficiency, Chief, Tamayo. It seems entrusting you with logistics was the right choice. He casually lifted his chin. Just put them over there. I'm not very interested in the specific locations of rat holes, they're all just trash heaps to be cleaned up in the end. The main thing is to circle the biggest rat for me. Tamayo placed the intelligence on the low cabinet beside her as instructed, feeling a chill at his dismissive tone, but more so, a confirmation of his murderous intent towards Muzan. The most important clue points to the vicinity of Kyoto, especially the underground area of the Ubuyashiki clan's old residence. There are unusual energy fluctuations there, and traces of that esteemed person having appeared personally. Additionally, upper rank 1, Kokushibo, his activity range seems to be linked to an ancient sword Dao dojo in the north, but the exact location. All right, that's enough. Si Jinkin suddenly interrupted her, lazily standing up, his tall figure casting a deeper shadow in the small clinic. Knowing the general direction is enough. Intelligence work is your strong suit, trash cleanup is my specialty. We each have our roles. He paced 2 steps, his scarlet gaze falling on Tamayo again, filled with scrutiny. Oh, right, he seemed to recall something, his tone as casual as if discussing the weather. This thing, it's for you. He raised his hand, pulling something from his chest and tossing it towards Tamayo without even looking. The object arced through the air, carrying the cold texture of metal. Tamayo instinctively reached out and caught it. It was heavy and cold in her hand. She looked down, and her pupils suddenly constricted. It was an irregular, jagged fragment of a black mask. Though only a fragment, the eerie patterns carved into it and the ancient, evil, and chaotic chi that instantly assailed her, indescribable, struck her like a lightning bolt. This chi was even deeper than Muzan's, even more chaos. She instantly recognized it. It was part of the bizarre mask Si Jinkin had been wearing on his face earlier. What is this? Tamayo's voice was filled with uncontrollable shock and a hint of primal fear. Oh, that stone mask. Si Jinkin's tone was as light as if he were talking about a broken bowl, one accidentally broke it. It's just a fragment, it's useless for me to keep it, and it takes up space. Seeing as you're a doctor who likes to research, I'm giving it to you. Consider it a welcome gift for joining. Or, an advance on research funds. He let out his characteristic strange laugh. Stone mask. Tamayo clutched the cold fragment tightly, her fingertips feeling the contained, heart-pounding power fluctuations. She had never heard of such a thing. This was clearly not something a demon created by Muzan could possess. The mystery of Si Jinkin's identity seemed to become even more perplexing. Yes, the stone mask. Si Jinkin seemed quite pleased with her shocked expression. Wearing it under the moonlight, or under certain special conditions, might lead to some interesting changes. Who knows? Anyway, it's broken now. Take it and play with it, see if you can research anything. Maybe you can find a new way to restrain Muzan. Oh ho ho ho. Another burst of inexplicable laughter. Tamayo forcibly suppressed the turbulent waves in her heart, trying to analyze the meaning behind this sudden gift. A test, trust, or pure mischief. She looked up at C. Jenkins' scarlet and profound pupils, trying to find an answer, but saw only a chaotic mockery. I will do my best to research it. Tamayo carefully put away the fragment. It was absolutely priceless, and potentially a huge source of danger. However, Mr. C. Jenkins, regarding the intelligence gathering on Muzan and subsequent contact. Tisk, troublesome. C. Jenkins impatiently waved his hand, interrupting her. If there's progress with intelligence, or if you're missing some boring things like research materials or funds, don't look for me. Go ask my subordinates. His tone was casual, as if discussing a trivial matter. Your subordinates? Tamayo was startled. Yes, my organization. C. Jenkins pointed to the ground, then spread his hands. Although I think they're very inefficient, always engaging in boring capital accumulation, they should be fine for running errands and delivering things. As for how to contact them. He paused, as if pondering a very difficult question, then suddenly snapped his fingers. Ah, right. Just go to the most conspicuous billboard in Tokyo and draw this symbol. He traced a highly abstract, crooked symbol in the air with his finger, looking like some kind of inexplicable graffiti. Professionals will naturally come to meet you. The code phrase. Just say, the esteemed person who seeks ultimate pleasure sent you. Perfect. Tamayo. She felt her carefully maintained sanity of many years being impacted like never before. What was all this? A mysterious fragment, an even more mysterious organization, and such a childish way of making contact. Was this truly the style of an existence capable of threatening Muzan? Her mind was left with only one thought. Is this person's mental state really okay? Alright, the intelligence has been given, the trash has been delivered, and the contact method has been explained. C. Jenkins stretched with a big yawn, his bones lightly crackling. His scarlet eyes swept over Tamayo's face, a mix of shock, confusion, and suppressed desire to complain, and the curve of his lips seemed to deepen. Well then, young Miss Tamayo, I'll be taking my leave. The smell of disinfectant here for too long would bore even an ultimate being. The world. Time begins to flow. He completely ignored Tamayo's hesitant expression and Yushiro's hostile yet weak gaze from the corner, walking straight to the door. As he pulled the door open, he seemed to remember something, turning back to Tamayo and saying in a very serious tone. Remember, Tamayo. The hymn of humanity is the hymn of courage. The greatness of humanity is the greatness of courage. Although you are a demon now, show some courage in your research. Ciao. He waved his hand, mimicking a classic pose, then his figure quickly merged into the darkness outside the door, leaving only that inexplicable Italian phrase echoing in the air. The clinic door gently closed, cutting off the outside world. Tamayo stood rooted to the spot, the cold touch of the stone mask fragment still lingering in her hand, her mind filled with chaotic information like, stone mask, my subordinates, billboard graffiti contact, ultimate pleasure, and hymn of courage. She felt her temples throbbing wildly, more exhausted than performing 10 difficult surgeries in a row. Madman. This guy is absolutely a complete madman. In the corner, Yushiro struggled, using all his strength to squeeze out this sentence through gritted teeth, his tone filled with the relief of surviving a calamity and extreme disgust for C. Jenkins. Tamayo did not retort. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. Regardless, the stone mask fragment was real, and the intelligence was also real. C. Jenkins' inhuman power was even more real. For her goal, she had to utilize everything, even if her collaborator was a schizophrenic whose thoughts jumped like an extraterrestrial being and who talked nonsense. She walked to the low cabinet, picked up the intelligence on Muzan in the upper ranks, then touched the cold fragment in her pocket. Her gaze became firm and sharp once more. Chaos was chaos, but hope, it seemed, was also contained within it. At the same time, deep within a highly concealed, starkly styled underground base in Tokyo, like a futuristic technology facility. C. Jenkins' figure appeared like a ghost in the center of a spacious metal room. He had built this room with knowledge from his previous life, as his previous life was that of a highly accomplished university student. He casually removed the remaining half of the mask from his face, revealing a sharply defined jawline. His scarlet pupils scanned the cold metal walls around him, seemingly bored. Killer Queen. Get me a cup of coffee, no sugar, thank you. he said to the empty room. Of course, there was no response. He shrugged and walked to a large holographic projection console in the center of the room, casually tapping a few times. The screen instantly lit up, displaying complex charts and data streams. A clear, emotionless electronic synthesized voice sounded. Welcome back, Lord C. Jinkin. You have one new message, marked, priority, funds preparation complete. Oh. A hint of interest, but more so an expected boredom, flashed in C. Jinkin's scarlet pupils. Those boring, capital games, are done. My subordinates' efficiency is decent this time. They didn't make me use, bites the dust, to start over. He clicked on the message. The screen clearly displayed a line of text, target amount reached. All funds preparation work completed, available for use at any time. C. Jinkin looked at the message, a cold, absolutely controlled curve slowly forming on his lips. HMPH. He let out an inexplicable hum, his scarlet eyes flashing with dangerous and excited light. Very good. Well then, the boring preparatory work is over. He turned off the screen, and the room plunged back into dimness. Only those scarlet eyes, shining in the shadows, remained, like a beast before its hunt. Next, it's time to find some real fun. For example, to test the mettle of that, strongest Hashira. Aura and Muda, which is more practical. He thought for a moment, then muttered to himself, forget it, I'll go to Egypt first. Tamayo clutched the cold stone mask fragment tightly, her knuckles white from the excessive force. The sharp edges of the fragment almost pierced her skin, but the bone-deep chill and heavy sensation it imparted startled her far more than any physical prick. She forced herself to look away, as if another second of gazing at the grotesque, twisted patterns on the fragment would suck away her soul. Lady Tamayo. Yushiro struggled, his voice filled with the weakness of a survivor and a deep-seated hatred for C. Jinkin. That lunatic. Not a single word he said can be trusted. And this demonic thing. He stared intently at the fragment in Tamayo's hand, his face etched with disgust and fear. This is definitely a trap. That person named C. Jinkin is a walking calamity himself. Tamayo did not respond immediately. The scent of disinfectant in the clinic could not dispel the thick fog of chaos that C. Jinkin had left in her mind. The people below, billboard graffiti, supreme pleasure, ode to courage, these phrases swirled like a flock of noisy ravens around the walls of her reason. That guy's way of doing things was like dragging the word, reliable, through the mud, then stomping on it a million times with, made in heaven, acceleration. She took a deep breath, the cold air forcibly cooling her scattered thoughts slightly. Whether C. Jinkin was an ultimate life form or an ultimate psychopath, two things were real. The ominous fragment in her hand, and the intelligence about Muzan on the low cabinet, acquired through countless tears and blood. The spark of hope is often wrapped in the most dangerous fuel. To end Kibutsuji Muzan's curse, she had no choice. Yushiro, calm down. Tamayo's voice carried an undeniable authority, but her gaze never left the fragment. His mental energy stayed aside. This power, it's real. She paused, then added, far older than Muzan, more, origin. She walked towards the innermost experiment table in the clinic, her movements carrying a solemnity akin to pilgrimage. On the experiment table were various precise instruments, an old centrifuge, reagent bottles with complex compositions, high magnification microscopes, all tools she had accumulated over centuries of fighting and researching demons. She carefully placed the stone mask fragment on a specially made black velvet tray. The fragment glowed with a dark, ominous luster under the light, like a solidified abyss. Tamayo put on special isolation gloves, which could block most energy radiation and biological contamination. She first took a high-precision energy detector, a device she had modified by combining Western technology with the perception abilities of demons. When the probe cautiously approached the fragment, the meter's needle instantly shot to the right, full scale, emitting a piercing buzzing alarm. The reading, far exceeding the detection limit, made Tamayo's pupils contract. This energy intensity was enough to instantly vaporize an ordinary lower-ranked demon. Its nature was even more unprecedented, neither pure biological energy nor a demon's cursed energy, but closer to some, primitive chaos. Just like the unordered yet powerful force contained within, Stone Ocean, itself. Impossible, Tamayo murmured, her voice carrying a barely perceptible tremor. She quickly adjusted the equipment, lowering the detection sensitivity, and the needle barely managed to stay at the edge of the danger zone. Just a fragment, and the energy field was so terrifying. If it were the complete mask, she dared not imagine. Next was the biological test. Tamayo used specially made alloy tweezers, with a hardness comparable to diamond, to very carefully scrape off a microscopic amount of powder, almost invisible to the naked eye, from the thinnest edge of the fragment. The powder fell into a test tube containing a special culture solution. The culture solution was her exclusive formula, capable of producing a violent reaction to any biologically active substance. The moment the powder dropped into the liquid, an anomaly suddenly occurred. The originally clear culture solution, as if a red-hot branding iron had been thrown into it, instantly boiled and churned violently. Its color rapidly changed from light blue to murky dark red, then to an unsettling purplish black. The test tube wall, centered at the point of contact, quickly solidified a thick layer of black crystals resembling coral reefs, and continuously spread upwards, emitting faint, crackling sounds. Even more horrifying, the liquid inside the test tube seemed to have come alive, constantly impacting the test tube wall, attempting to break through its confinement. Killer Queen. Lower the isolation shield for me. Tamayo commanded sharply, even though she knew it was just her talking to herself, but C. Jenkins' naming convention was too infectious. She quickly placed the violently reacting test tube into a thick, reinforced glass isolation shield, and simultaneously activated the negative pressure suction system. Just a few milligrams of powder, yet it displayed such terrifying life-corroding and matter-transforming abilities. This was thousands of times more potent than Muzan's blood. Tamayo's heart pounded. The fundamental nature of the power contained in this fragment overturned all her centuries of understanding of demons and anomalies. Muzan's demonification was a viral infection and evolution, but this fragment was more like directly altering the laws of reality, forcibly pushing life towards some unknown, chaotic, evolutionary endpoint. This reminded her of the legendary arrow, but that thing brought about stand users, while this fragment was more like creating some more primitive, closer to the origin of the world monster. No wonder C. Jenkins said, wearing it under the moonlight might lead to interesting changes. This was essentially playing a stone mask version of Russian roulette. Win and become the ultimate being cars. Lose and directly turn into a Beach Boy sculpture. Lady Tamayo. What exactly is this thing? Yushiro looked at the hell-like reaction inside the isolation shield, his face pale. It's 100 times more terrifying than Muzan's poisonous blood. I don't know, Yushiro. Tamayo's voice was unusually solemn. She stared intently at the substance inside the isolation shield, which had gradually calmed down but had become like solidified asphalt. But its power level completely transcends Kibutsuji Muzan's system. It's older, more origin. C. Jenkins mentioned it's called a stone mask. Countless ancient legends and fragments of forbidden knowledge flashed through her mind. Perhaps, it's related to the legend of the Pillar Man. Or, some earlier, forgotten, extraterrestrial object. As mysterious as the heaven that Dio pursued. She felt as if she was touching a taboo domain far deeper and more dangerous than Muzan. She cautiously removed the isolation shield, confirmed the reaction had completely stopped, and sealed the crystallized, despair-inducing residue in a special container. Then, she redirected all her attention to the seemingly inert fragment itself on the tray. The subsequent microscopic observation made Tamayo gasp. Under the high magnification microscope, the surface of the fragment was not smooth at all. The seemingly abstract patterns, when magnified, were actually composed of countless minuscule, twisted, squirming runes, smaller than nanometers. These runes seemed to possess life, subtly fluctuating under the observation light, constantly arranging and combining into various incomprehensible patterns, sometimes like stars, sometimes like twisted internal organs of creatures, and sometimes like some blasphemous geometric totem. They seemed to be spontaneously absorbing, transforming, and radiating some indescribable energy. Tamayo tried to perceive it with her mental energy, but it felt as if she had thrown her consciousness into a spinning universal vortex, almost losing herself in it. Frightened, she immediately cut off the connection, cold sweat seeping from her forehead. This is practically the epitaph of Crimson King. It cannot be analyzed by common sense at all. Tamayo felt a dizzy spell. This fragment itself was a living, constantly evolving chaos system. Its technological level, if it could be called technology, far surpassed the understanding of humans, or even demons. Si Jinkin actually casually threw this thing to her like trash. Either he was appallingly ignorant of the fundamental nature of its power, but this was highly unlikely. He clearly could wield the mosque's power, or he was so powerful that he could completely disregard this level of danger. Whichever it was, it sent shivers down Tamayo's spine. She wearily rubbed her brow, feeling more mentally drained than after 10 consecutive high-difficulty surgical operations. Si Jinkin's chaos, the stone mask fragment's chaos, Muzin's shadow, this triple pressure almost crushed her. But she could not fall. She cast her gaze towards the intelligence on the low cabinet. The old Ubuyashiki residence's basement, Kyoto. Upper rank 1, Kokushibo, an ancient Dao dojo in the north. These were clear targets, paths to revenge. Although the deal with Si Jinkin was like dancing with the devil, at least he provided a weapon and a research sample that could potentially turn the tide of battle. Tamayo's eyes once again became sharp, her fatigue replaced by deep resolve. She carefully placed the stone mask fragment into a specially made, multi-layered lead box and locked it. This thing was too dangerous, it had to be studied with extreme caution. The immediate priority was to verify the intelligence and find Muzin's hiding place. Yushiro, Tamayo's voice returned to its usual calm, prepare. We need to go to Kyoto immediately. That intelligence points to the old residence of the Ubuyashiki family, it might be key. Kyoto. Now. Yushiro was startled, then anxiously said, but Lady Tamayo, your body hasn't fully recovered. And that lunatic just left, what if he? Time waits for no one. Tamayo interrupted him, picking up the dossier. Si Jinkin is right, time is precious. He waits for intelligence, we wait for the chance for revenge. As for him. Tamayo remembered Si Jinkin's parting words, go have some fun, and his muttered, go to Egypt. A complex glint flickered in her crimson eyes. His kind of existence, his whereabouts are not something we can predict. Kono Doda can't guess his thoughts either. We just need to do what we need to do. She walked to the window, looking out at the deep night. Tokyo's neon lights flickered in the distance, like sleepless demon eyes. The huge billboard was faintly visible. Billboard, graffiti, contact, supreme pleasure, Tamayo's mouth twitched slightly. This absurd method of communication was an insult to her intelligence. But, this seemed to be the organization style of Si Jinkin. Regardless, the path had been chosen. Pandora's box had been opened, whether it released calamity or hope, only by reaching the end would she know. She clenched her fist, her nails digging deep into her palm. To end this millennium-long curse, she was willing to embrace this chaotic fire from the abyss. Meanwhile, deep within a cold, hard-styled underground base in Tokyo, resembling a SPW Foundation secret facility. Si Jinkin's crimson eyes scanned the concise message on the holographic screen, target quota achieved. All funding preparations complete, available for use at any time. HMPH, those guys playing capital games below, this time they didn't make me use, bites the dust, to rewind. Efficiency barely passable. A cold arc curved at the corner of his mouth, there was no warmth in that smile, only satisfaction that resources were in place and anticipation for the fun to come. He turned off the screen, and the room plunged into darkness. Those crimson eyes, glowing in the shadows, were like Killer Queen locking onto its prey. Preparations, complete. He murmured, his voice echoing in the empty metal room. Next, it's dinner time. Egypt, the arrow, the legacy of Horus God. The path, Dio, didn't complete. Heh. Interesting. Too interesting. Let me see if this arrow can bring me supreme pleasure beyond the world. Without the slightest hesitation, his tall figure blurred in the center of the room, as if swallowed by space itself. The world. Time. Flow faster. Target, Cairo, Egypt. Silently, as if purple haze had consumed space, Si Jinkin's figure completely vanished from the base, leaving only an empty chair and a lingering, dangerous and excited aftertaste in the air. The journey to Egypt, to find the arrow of stand awakening, had begun. And in the Tokyo clinic, Tamayo was packing the heavy dossier into her bag, unaware of the storm about to erupt in distant Cairo. Thanks for watching.